All right, good evening, everyone. I'd like to call to order the City Council Redevelopment Successor Agency regular meeting of June 4th, 2018. And I'd like to call to order and do a roll call and let the record reflect that all 5 council members are here this evening. And let us begin, please, with the Pledge of Allegiance. I did want to report out that we did have a special meeting at 5 and direction was given to staff. So to begin this evening, we're going to go ahead and have an approval of the agenda. So are there any motions?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you very much. Clearly passes. Okay, moving on to an approval of minutes. There's quite a few here. I hope you all read them. May 7th, May 14th, and a special meeting plus May 17th, closed session and special meeting minutes. So do I have an approval for those minutes to be
So
accepted?
moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you. It clearly passes. Okay, now we're going to report. I already did. I reported out on closed session. Direction was given to staff regarding labor contracts. So now we move to announcements and presentations, which is really a great part of the evening, and I'm glad we're starting with it. So the 2017 annual Marie Sparks Memorial Volunteer Award will be presented, and I'm going to go ahead and turn the mic over to Anna Grant. Thank you so much.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of the council. I am pleased to be here tonight to be presenting the 2017 annual Marie Sparks Memorial Volunteer Award. A little bit about Miss Marie Sparks. She was a woman of vision, compassion, and grit. A no-nonsense kind of person, Marie saw problems and needs in our community, the seniors, the children, and animals. Asking for help was easy for Marie. She just didn't take no for an answer. She rubbed shoulders with federal and state legislators as easily as she did with the poorest of the poor in our community. She was a low-income senior who did not let lack of her own resources stand in her way. Marie had the ability to inspire others to work with her, to get to the heart of a problem to find a solution. She left a legacy of good works, many admiring friends, and a stronger community. Upon her death in 1995, the Healdsburg City Council wished to remember Marie's giving and unselfish spirit by creating the annual Marie Sparks Memorial Volunteer Award. This award is presented annually, recognizing outstanding volunteer service for the previous calendar year to members in our community. And I will allow some of the nominators to talk to you about today's 2 very special individuals. And I would like to invite all of you here and members in the audience to our senior center afterwards for a dessert reception and get to know these 2 fantastic individuals. So, we have 2 recipients of this award this evening, and the first of the 2 is Kim Thompson. So here, nominating Kim Thompson is our very own Richard Bergarski.
Thank you. Kim Thompson is a Healdsburg High graduate. He retired from CAL FIRE in 2011 after 37 years and is still involved with CAL FIRE in his retirement. Kim has been an integral part of the Healdsburg High School Athletic Booster Club for over 15 years, and this past year, Kim has been serving his 2nd tour as president of the club. Formed in 1975, the Healdsburg High School Booster Club supports hundreds of athletes on over 30 teams in 18 sports programs. Over 400 high school parents, Healdsburg High alumni, community members, and local businesses make up the membership of the Boosters. During Kim's years of club volunteering and leadership, the Boosters have distributed over $700,000 to the athletes and athletic programs at Healdsburg High School. Kim has not only been an exceptional leader, you can also find him working the snack bars, food booths, golf tournaments, membership drives, car shows, and the list goes on. Kim always says yes when it comes to student athletes at Healdsburg High School. On top of all the work and leadership that Kim provides the boosters, he is also a really great person who cares deeply about the value of student athletics and the ideal of healthy body, healthy mind. Kim Thompson is someone who epitomizes the generous and unselfish spirit of service in Healdsburg and greatly deserves to be a recipient of the 2017 Marie Sparks Memorial Volunteer Award. Kim Thompson. Probably get to say a few words too.
Thank you very much. I came prepared. Community, a particular area or place considered together with its inhabitants, a feeling of ownership with others as a result of sharing common attitude, interests, and goals. When you're part of a community, you seek to give back, especially to those areas and people who have influenced you or helped you in the past. That's what sports did for me. Growing up as a pre-teenager without a father, being heavily obese for a 12-year-old, and lacking confidence, sports filled many of my needs. Coaches helped me fill the father figure, discipline that I needed. The exercise allowed me to lose those extra pounds and put on muscle back then. And also recognizing that girls seem to gravitate more towards thinner boys kind of helped me lose weight as well. As I got better in sports, my confidence improved as well. Some may say too much. So with that happening in my formative years, when I became a father, I knew the value sports could bring to children, my children. And I volunteered or coached, for many of my daughters, Becky and son Greg's team. That in turn led me to work towards ensuring all Healdsburg High School kids who wanted to play sports had the opportunity and the tools, equipment, support needed to participate. This has led me to the boosters, where I was totally in awe of the work ethic, passion, and dedication people like Dorothy Studer, Norm Buchignani, Martha Brooks, Dick Bogarski, Pauline and Wayne Rogers, just to name a few, put in for the Greyhound Boosters for the good of the Healdsburg High School student athlete. I joined a group of people who continue to serve to this day. They are my inspiration. These are the type of people that make up a community, not a city, metropolis, or town, but a community. Okay, I've got one other thing. I'm able to say this at graduations for the Fire Academy, which I coordinate at the junior college. And I think it's somewhat appropriate for what's happening today to us being honored. Watch your thoughts, they become words. Watch your words, they become actions. Watch your actions, they become habits. Watch your habits, they become character. And watch your character as it becomes destiny. And that's anonymous. I got it about 35 years ago and try to get it out there as much as I can. So, and finally, thank you for this honor. Looking at and knowing many of the past honorees, I am truly honored to even be mentioned with these outstanding community members. And lastly, go Hounds. Thank you.
Thank you, Kim. Our next 2017 annual Marie Sparks Memorial Volunteer Award will be Graham Hahn, and his nominator is Miss Cindy Beth.
I said I didn't want to follow Dick. I should have said I didn't want to follow Kim. Thank you. It's our pleasure to introduce Graham Hahn as recipient of the Marie Sparks Volunteer of the Year. Graham has served the youth of Healdsburg by running St. John's CYO basketball program for 22 years. As many volunteers, Graham and his wife Arlie began volunteering for the activities their children enjoy. For the Hahn family, that's basketball. Soon after, Graham was helping to run the program, then unexpectedly became the sole leader in 1996. Healdsburg CYO program serves 170 to 250 players per year from ages 8 to 14. There's not a board of directors or a volunteer crew. Graham does it all. He attends the monthly CYO meetings with the diocese and helps to develop the governing rules and schedule. He serves on the diocese board as vice president. He communicates, collects, and processes player registration. He recruits and trains coaches. He runs assessments. He assigns the teams. He works with the school entities to obtain and schedule gym time for practices and games, which in Healdsburg, you should know, is very difficult. So they have to play their games in Geyserville. During the game season, he's at the gym all day. He can be seen sweeping floors, emptying trash cans, making sure volunteer coaches, scorekeepers, and clock runners are all in place. And when they're not, he jumps in. He will even referee a game when needed. As a comparison, you know me from Healdsburg Little League. We have 14 to 18 teams a year with 65 to 200 players, very similar size. Our board of directors has 12 to 14 volunteers. The president deals with the district and handles administration. The registration committee of 2 or 3 handles the registration, organizing, and processing. The player agent makes the schedule and assigns the team by draft. The coaching coordinator recruits and trains the coaches. The facilities crew of 2 to 5 people keep the facilities clean and maintained. The volunteer coordinator organizes parent volunteers. The safety officer handles any injuries throughout the season. Graham does that all. In addition to running the league, Graham has also coached at least one team, sometimes more, almost every year, until Arlie said no more. His focus is on fundamentals and playing to learn the game and have fun. And he takes pride in knowing that many of the youth players go on to play in junior high and high school. Now that said, Graham doesn't do it all by himself. The entire Hahn family runs CYO basketball. Through the years, Graham, Arlie, Jeffrey, Robert, James, and Helen Ann have been a family unit keeping the program going. They all have run the clock, kept score, swept the gym floors, and when they were old enough, Robert and James have also coached teams. James has continued on as a coach at HHS, and he's often still the only one who knows how to run the scoreboard. Recently, St. John's has been supported by Father Sean and St. John's Parish, who also helps Graham to run the program. But Graham is the driving force. On behalf of the many players and all the thankful parents, we congratulate Graham Hahn for this award.
Thank you very much. I'd like to thank you very much for this award. It wouldn't be possible without my family and their support through the years. This basketball's always been a love of mine from the very beginning. I've coached as many as 5 teams in one year. This was the first year, this last year, that I did not coach a team. And it was very relaxing and peaceful not doing that. I would like to really thank, my job I think has been very easy without the support of the former priests at St. John's, some of whom and other people are not here with us anymore.
especially Father Tom Devereaux, Father Walt Regina, and Neil Cronin, who really, when I, about 10 years ago, was having a hard stretch in CYO, he really helped me through it, kind of just telling me not to give up. Don't give up on the kids, because it really is all about the kids. And as far as all the work, it's really not work for me. I enjoy it. I referee most of the 3rd and 4th grade games in CYO at Geyserville, simply because I enjoy it. But also I use it, we pay the referees money, and I just leave it in there for scholarship money for kids who are disadvantaged and can't afford the program. The best moment came in my 2nd year doing it, and it's one of the things that just defines the whole program, the ideal of the program. And it wasn't that the child was a great athlete or anything, but after the season was over, the mom came up to me and said, "Thank you for making a difference in my son's life." It's really turned him around and gave him a focus, and hopefully it followed through. So thank you very much.
As the mayor, and I'm going to take prerogative on this, I want to comment on the last recipient as well for 30 seconds or more. You can time this. On December 26, 2006, my son, Taylor Berry, who was being coached by Graham Hahn, was diagnosed with a brain tumor. And he was at Healdsburg Junior High. And anyway, the first call in the PICU, which is an acronym for Pediatric Intensive Care Unit, I called Graham, which I hadn't talked to him for a while, but Taylor got through his brain surgery because he learned how to be tough with you, and he knew pain with a purpose. And I called you. Do you remember that night? And you do pick up the phone. And I remember I'm in Oakland Children's Hospital, and I'm scared, and my kid just, 26 stitches, no sympathy. Guy's great now. He's running around. You think he's the handsomest guy in the whole town. But Taylor Berry, my son, greatly benefited from your coaching and your willingness to work with him. And I'll never forget the who's your man? Who's your man? And he knew who his man was, and he had to go cover him. And I just really appreciate this community service, Kim. I appreciate your emotiveness. I think this town really has a great group of really wonderful men that are out there mentoring young men and women. And I'm just really pleased to be able to say something personal about Graham Hahn and the difference he made in my son's life, but also our family's life. And just thank you so much for the willingness to help young people and be there in those moments when we need it. So thank you. And thank you very much, everybody, for being here for this special award, the Marie Sparks Award. And I know there's a lot of other recipients in here. Maybe you want to raise your hand so we can see all the people that have received this in the past. Come on, put your hands up. It's such a great thing to know that our community is what you said. It really is. It's not a town. It's not a city. I mean, yes, officially, but it is the community. And we really appreciate you stepping up. And I just love this award. And I'm so pleased to be here tonight to start our maybe long meeting with something so positive and so wonderful. It's a lot to celebrate tonight. So thank you very much, everybody, for coming out and being supportive of this special award that I hope we continue forever in this town. Thank you so much, everybody. And I don't know if people want to do the grand escape or not right now, but probably. So thanks again, Graham and Kim, very much. All right, we're just really pleased that so many people come out for the community award. So thanks again for coming. And we're going to shift over to some wonderful community work as well. You can see I've deviated tonight and put this beautiful bag that I received yesterday, but this is our jazz our jazz festival. So we're going to move on to a proclamation. So if we want to maybe close the doors back there and kind of give those people a chance to get over to the senior center, right? Wish we were all going. Feel a little bit more, staying human and everything in here. So I'm going to move to a proclamation that I was delighted to read on Saturday already. So I've already read these words, so I do like to spread it out. So I have asked a fellow council member, of course, everyone knows Sean McCaffrey's support of the arts in this town, so he would like to make the proclamation, read it. So if I could please ask who's here to receive this. We have a few people, I'm sure. But whoever wants to receive it, we're here for you to do this award of a proclamation for this evening and the Jazz Festival week. So thank you. All right, so McCaffrey, go.
This is a proclamation of the City Council of the City of Healdsburg declaring June 1st through 10th, 2018 as Healdsburg Jazz Week in the City of Healdsburg. Whereas the 20th anniversary of the Healdsburg Jazz Festival will take place June 1st through 10th, it's well underway, in, around, and all over Healdsburg. And whereas thousands of visitors and local jazz music fans will attend the many individual concerts and jazz performances, and whereas world-renowned jazz musicians will be performing at the Healdsburg Jazz Festival, including many who have performed in Healdsburg at past festivals, and whereas hundreds of Healdsburg residents will again volunteer and help and welcome the thousands of guests and festival goers, whereas many local businesses, individuals, and organizations have supported and contributed to 20 years of Healdsburg Jazz Festival performances and activities, and whereas over 16,000 students have benefited from Healdsburg Jazz's music, education, and outreach programs, including Operation Jazz Band for 5th graders, Black History Month for elementary school students, Student Jazz Combo Competition for 10 Sonoma County high schools, Latin Jazz Lecture and Concert in high school and middle school, and Lift Every Voice and Sing, a community jazz choir and big band program celebrating jazz music's capacity to serve as a unifying force in a diverse society. And whereas Healdsburg Jazz Festival is debuting the Jazz Village, a new community building initiative to celebrate, educate, and inspire people about everything jazz, and whereas the Healdsburg Jazz Festival has proven to be a great pairing for Healdsburg's fabulous wine, food, and natural beauty, and whereas Jessica Felix, Healdsburg Jazz's founder and artistic director, has been the driving force behind 20 consecutive years of the Healdsburg Jazz Festivals, and whereas Healdsburg is now known as a great jazz destination around the world, and its annual jazz festival has been declared one of the best small jazz festivals in the country, if not the world. Now, therefore, let it be proclaimed that the City Council of the City of Healdsburg does hereby declare June 1st through 10th, 2018 as Healdsburg Jazz Week, and Healdsburg urges all community members and others to contribute their appreciation for this authentic indigenous American art form known as jazz. Congratulations.
And just to add, Gina Reiner is here with Jessica Felix, and you were communicating with me non-verbally. Thank you. That was wonderful. Would you share out loud what you would like?
One of our world-class jazz musicians is here, Charles Lloyd.
Charles. Thank you. I think I'm ready to do this, Charles. You ready to do this? Okay, sorry.
But what an honor to have him here to hear this and see how our city appreciates what we bring here. And I thank you for your support. And I thank everybody for believing in the vision and hoping to join the music. And as a fearless and endless promoter, I'll have some programs out in the lobby. And you want to say something? No. Anyway.
I just want to once again say how important it is to do community work, and we really are blessed. And you blessed us last night with a wonderful concert. I just want to mention that because the artist needs to be recognized, and your beautiful presence last night really filled me to get ready for tonight's meeting, which is going to be intense for me. So I just want to thank you for your healing language of music, and thank you, Jessica, once again for everything you do to make things happen. And you've got a strong commitment to this. Thank you. And Gina, you have been an addition that this festival is very. Anyway, I just had to hug you.
Thank you. And thank you guys all too.
Thank you.
You've been. Even David McKaylee and everybody, we're all on a team. So I'll put the programs out. We got 7 more days.
Thanks again for coming and being present for this. Thank you. All right. Whew, good beginning. This is like, I wish every meeting started so I just love this. Okay. All right, moving on to city manager, who doesn't have a report, but we do list it each time, being open and willing to listen. We are moving now to public comments on non-agenda items. So this is a time to speak to your city council, the town council, your council on non-agenda items. So if you would like to speak, I'd love to know how many people are interested in non-agenda items tonight. Great. Okay. So the rules are, sorry, you can come up. I'm sorry. I just wanted to let you know. The rules are we're shooting for 3 minutes, and we really appreciate if you state your name. And again, these are things not on the agenda.
Good.
Thank you. Welcome.
I hope we can continue some of this good feeling about volunteerism and participation in our city. George Lawson, 424 Tucker. I'm here to express my appreciation to Mark Themick and his staff for the growing partnership between our Park and Recreation Department and the 4 North County Rotary Clubs in our effort to enrich the lives of children with special needs and their families. Through a program that we call SNAP, that's Special Needs Activity Program, and the Wonder League, we have served 60 children and their families during the past 16 weeks. I'm proud to say that 1/3 of those were from Spanish-speaking families. In an effort to increase the comfort and inclusion among students in our schools, we include buddies. Those are kids from service clubs, sports teams at the 3 North County school districts, and the Little League, as well as the Prune Packers even, which was great fun this weekend for our final game and banquet. The parents also join in the activities, and it's been especially enriching, I think, for all of us to participate in these programs, the Rotary volunteers as well. The Wonder League is an 8-week baseball league for special needs children, and SNAP is a 2-hour program on Saturdays during the summer and school year with activities in music and dance, arts and crafts, and gymnastics and yoga. The power of these programs are seen in the results. Ray Sean, I wish I had a picture to show you Ray Sean. He was so shy that his mother had to be out with him at every activity for weeks. And then finally, by the end of the season, he was on his own having fun with his buddy and the rest of the kids, despite his pretty significant mental disabilities. I'm happy to say that we will be ensuring the sustainability of the SNAP program by adding expertise through hiring and training in the Park and Recreation Department and some equipment that we have donated from our Rotary clubs. And I'm proud that Rotary Cares. Rotary Cares is actually the collaboration of the 4 North County Rotary clubs. We've been able to help our committee services to be more inclusive in their programming. I'm really happy about that. And Rotary is committed to this partnership to ensure that this program remains successful, and we'll do our share and everything we can to help serve the special needs community in both in the North County. Thank you.
Anyone else like to speak on a non-agenda item issue? Welcome. Thank you.
Good evening, Council, Madam Mayor. Vern Losh. Tonight I'm wearing the Healdsburg Kiwanis hat. I know I spoke to all of you before about this, but the 44th annual Fitch Mountain Foot Race is this Sunday. It starts at 8 o'clock, fitchmountainfootrace.org. I have little flyers I'll leave out front, but you're all welcome. We have a special bike category this year, bicycle category, because I saw you pedal those things so well at the FFA fair that we wanted to make that open to you too. But Sunday, June 10th, we'll be out there on the streets running around Fitch Mountain. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's interesting to sit next to someone that you hired 40 years ago at $25 an hour.
His pay has gone up.
Yeah, his price has gone up, but his quality hasn't decreased whatsoever. I want to thank you for the 4 years I spent on the Planning Commission. It ended more than 45 years in planning, and I'm looking forward to my retirement and becoming Rotary President in a couple of weeks. And I thank you. But I want to talk about 3 T's. As I leave the commission, there are 3 things that I want to leave with you that need to be done. Your staff has done an excellent job over the last 4 years. But the first T is training. The training for the Planning Commission is abysmal, and I'm being kind. I used to give my commissioners a book, the Planning Commissioner's Handbook out of the League of Cities, Fulton's book on planning, 4 or 5 references, guides, and training. Finally, I understand in the budget you're going to have the possibility of going to the League of California Cities Planning Commissioners Institute. It's a start. You have to invest in your commissioners. They are very bright, very talented, and very good. But you can't expect a lot out of them unless you train them. The worst training, it's not the worst training I've seen, but you need to put the money into your commissions. And say thank you to them occasionally. It would be really helpful. I had a policy and practices on training commissioners. Second is technology, second T. I implemented my first permit tracking system in 1986. You still don't have an up and running permit tracking system. If you had instituted even the basic Sierra Designs, Sierra systems, which became Excella, or CRW back then, and kept track, you'd save thousands and thousands of dollars. Your consultant here has to have people look for background material paper-wise. You need to catch up. It's really important. When I went into Napa, they didn't have a system. Within 2 years, they had a system, and I didn't have people coming in getting permits, and they could go online and see where their comments were. It's the basic tools. Finally, tools. Your zoning ordinance needs considerable work. There are things such as stream setbacks. People come in for a routine variance because no one believes in them, and they get granted. It costs them thousands of dollars and months of wait. Look at your codes. General plan's important, but you got to keep your codes to date. You're out of date. So in the next few years, work on your training, technology, and tools. You have a good city manager, excellent city manager, good staff, but you got a long ways to go. Just keep working on the basics. I'm retiring. I'm becoming Rotary President in a couple weeks, and I'm very happy to have served you, and you've got a great commission. Keep working with them. Thank you.
Thank you for your service and for information. I like those debrief moments when people leave, they get a little exit interview. It's nice. Thank you. Anybody else like to come up on a non-agenda item? I took notes too, Mr. Botterini, just, you know. Welcome and thank you for coming.
Thanks. My name is Louis Jordan. Built a home here in 2002, so have been here part-time or full-time, depending upon where I was working. Since then, I'm not going to be here for the GMO discussion, which I heard about a few days ago because I'm flying out to Indiana tomorrow to a board meeting. But I think my comments are broad enough that they go beyond that. I guess I struggle to understand kind of process in terms of how things are, how things get on the agenda, and how I guess how votes get taken by the city council. The thing I'm struggling with GMO, and I know I shouldn't be talking about that because that's an agenda item, is that votes have been had multiple times on it, and it doesn't appear that the will of the people is actually being adhered to. So I think a couple of things could help me and other residents like me understand why there's such persistence in this area. I don't know from a city administration standpoint, that would be the city manager and those people that are staff within the city, how they get their marching orders, what their goals are, and how they get measured. And I think it would help us as residents who pay taxes in town to understand that process, because it appears to me that things get put on agendas quite spontaneously or by people other than what I would consider, a kind of critical mass of individuals. So I'd like to know what drives agenda within the city administration and kind of what goals are with the city manager and how the city manager is measured on an annual basis and whether or not that is public. With respect to housing, I'm not a rocket scientist, but I don't think you have to be one to see that there are probably, I'm going to estimate a couple hundred, either apartments or probably 300 to 400, either apartments or homes that are either under construction or have been constructed within the last 12 months. Once again, not a rocket scientist, but if you do the math and say that each of those generates somewhere from 2 to 4 people within Healdsburg, the town of Healdsburg, which was 10,000 or so when I came, I think it was a little under 10,000, seems to be 11 and a half or so by the most recent consensus, will be considerably above that number. So from a quality of life standpoint, I don't get it. I don't understand what the urgency is around housing in Healdsburg. I understand what the urgency is around affordable housing in Healdsburg, and I guess it's up to whomever to say what they define as affordable. If somebody makes $140,000, I'm not sure that's affordable housing. Certainly that might create a housing gap, a housing need, but I'm not sure that's affordable. So I think information would be quite helpful in terms of knowing, based on the units that are underway or have been built over the last year, what's the expectation in terms of what the population of Healdsburg is going to be by the time of the 2020 census, and that would help inform us as to whether or not we should be growing or not growing. Obviously, I think you can tell I have a bias in this area because I built here for a certain reason. I live here now most of my time for a certain reason, and I would like to continue to. That's it. Thank you for your time. I would love to stay for the GMO
we
discussion
need you to stay
if
for
I
the
was
GMO
not flying out. But
all right.
I am.
Thank you. Thank you for your input. Thank you. All right. Anyone else like to come up for a non-agenda item? It's a slippery slope, Mr. Berg. Okay, he's going the other way. Okay. All right. Anyone else coming up for a non-agenda item? I'm so happy to see you. Get on up here. I'll sing hello, Dolly, only it's hello, Sue. Get up here. Welcome. It's great to see you. One of our former senior advisory commissioners.
Sue McMillan, and I live in Oregon now. It's been a year. June 30th was my last day here. And I just want you folks to know how much I love and still miss this town. It has my heart. And I didn't know that the GMO was going to be on the agenda tonight. I just am trying to see as many people as I can before I, have to get back home. And, but I just, sometimes I go on that Healdsburg, what's happening Healdsburg. And some of the people were complaining that they didn't have a place to sit when they were at the fair, for the kids, that there were not enough hay bales or something. And it just went on and on and on. And so I said, I can't help it. I have got to say something. I want you folks to really appreciate the town that you live in, that they support the kids, the community. Quit your bitching. And that's kind of all. I love being here. It feels good to come home to see the friends. I'll see some more people tomorrow night. But Healdsburg, there's just nothing like this town and community. Nothing matches it. It's wonderful. And I miss it. I miss you guys too.
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks for coming by. You look marvelous.
Thank you.
It's good to see you.
That's because I'm not spending all of my money on rent.
Okay. Thank
I could
you.
go to New Orleans.
Thank you.
Right?
Thank you for being here and for honoring us with your time. Thank you. All right, and is there anyone else for a non-agenda item tonight? We're going to move on. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and close the public comments on non-agenda items. And we'll move on to the consent calendar. And it's quite lengthy. Is there any motion?
I'll move to approve this consent calendar.
I'll second that.
Councilmember Gold?
Yes.
Councilmember McCaffrey?
Yes.
Councilmember Naokis?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Higley?
Yes.
Mayor Mansell? I also just want to note for the record that the action taken on item 6I was as the redevelopment successor agency.
Thank you very much. All right, so now we're moving to some public hearing items. The first is a resolution ordering the abatement of noxious weeds, rubbish, and refuse. And we're going to hold a public hearing and adopt a resolution ordering the abatement of noxious weeds, rubbish, and refuse. And looks like we have Chief Boaz and Inspector Hollister. Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor Mansell, members of council. I have with me tonight Linda Collister, our Division Chief Fire Marshal, and she's here to provide you with a short presentation on the Fire Department's weed abatement program for 2018. And after she's completed the presentation, we'll both be here to answer any questions you may have or questions from the public.
Mayor Mansell, City Council members, Linda Collister, Fire Marshal. Before you is a recommendation to hold a public hearing and adopt a resolution ordering the abatement of noxious weeds, rubbish, and refuse. Initial weed abatement inspections were completed the second and third week of April by the fire department. And on May 7th, the City Council declared a nuisance to exist on the properties listed on the 2018 abatement list that was compiled from those inspections. And we set a date and a time for this public hearing. So property owners were sent a letter shortly after that, giving 30 days to abate the nuisance or protest the notice at this public hearing. The first round of re-inspections occurred during the last week in May, and most of the owners have abated their properties, but re-inspections will occur until the second week in June. During this time, the fire department tries to contact the property owners and help them with the abatement. So if the property owners do not abate the nuisance within the required time frame, the city will complete the work using its own contractors and then bill back to the property owner. And if the city does not receive the payment, a lien's placed on the property tax roll and payment is received at a later date. So this program follows the government code for the process and has been found to be the most effective manner to abate the hazards on private property. So our recommended actions tonight, once again, are to hold the public hearing and consider the protests, and then adopt the resolution ordering the abatement of noxious weeds, rubbish, and refuse. And we're here to answer any questions.
Are there any questions? Yes, Councilman Naokis.
Just a quick question. Do you see any trends going in any direction, or is it pretty much just, well, here it is again?
Well, you know, I have to tell you, over the years, there's a lot of property owners who have learned the weed abatement process. So they know exactly when we're going to be doing the re-inspections. But the thing is, if you go out in middle May and you'll see a lot of high grass, and then you go out now and you'll see that a lot of it been mowed, especially a lot of people take in the 4th of July, because a lot of people don't want to mow their grass more than once a year because they have large properties. But in this government code, it does allow us to go back again if we have to, on some of the properties. So that's one of the good things.
So you're saying that some of the property owners are waiting until that last minute to do it, and that's some more and more of those owners are doing that. That's the only real trend you're seeing.
Yeah, well, also because of the fires, we have a lot more complaints coming in. And so a lot more property owners are listening to those. And so when we contact them, they are moving forward and getting those done as soon as possible.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Are there any other questions? Okay, so I'm going to open it to public comment, or should we continue our report?
That's all we have. If you have no
Okay, I
further
just want to make
questions.
sure there was nothing else Chief wanted to say. Okay, is there anyone from the public that would like to speak on
So
this?
just to clarify, Madam Mayor, opening the public hearing.
I'm sorry, public hearing. Thank you. So we are now going to open. Would you help me again, City Manager? Get me the language.
Opening the public hearing.
open the public hearing, please. Would anyone like to speak on this topic of weed abatement? All right, I'm going to now close.
I'll move to close the public hearing.
Second.
All right.
I move that we adopt a resolution ordering the abatement of noxious weeds, rubbish, and refuse.
Okay, I'm going to close the public hearing.
Move that we close the public hearing.
I second.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed?
Nope.
Okay, thank you. It's clearly passed, and now we'll move forward with the
With
resolution.
my motion to adopt a resolution ordering the abatement of noxious weeds, rubbish, and refuse.
Second.
Councilmember Gold?
Yes.
Councilmember McCaffrey?
Yes.
Councilmember Naokis?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Higley?
Yes.
Mayor Mansell?
And for keeping our city safe, and appreciate the time and effort. It's quite a list, too. I can't believe we can just put that list out with all those names. It's like, wow. Yeah, thank you. All right, so moving to our next agenda item, which has to do with signs. So let me just get here for a minute, please. The Land Use Code Amendment, and we're dealing with temporary signs, and we're conducting a public hearing, introducing for first reading by title only an ordinance amending Healdsburg Municipal Code, Section 20.16.205, temporary signs. And welcome to, would you say your name, please? Thank you, Scott. Welcome.
So, Madam Mayor, if I may, Director DeRosa, her son graduated, I believe, from your high school, and she is off for the few days celebrating that, and we have our senior planner presenting this information tonight.
It's good to be here. I won't repeat the recommended action since you just went through that yourself, so I'll skip right on to the background. Temporary signs are often used to advertise local events, provide directions, promote business activities, as well as to support elections. In Healdsburg, temporary signs are regulated to help prevent the excessive use, to preserve community character, as well as to promote traffic safety by not having distracting signs, etc., or misleading signs for that matter. In 2015, the Supreme Court heard a case called the Reed versus Town of Gilbert, which held that sign regulations must be content neutral. That is, the signs must be regulated without consideration of the content of the sign message itself. As a result of that, there's a couple of areas that the temporary sign ordinance for Healdsburg need to be addressed. First of all, the current regulations don't differentiate between residential and commercial uses with respect to temporary signs. And second, the section on political sign regulations is not content neutral. And so that's really one of the main reasons that we're here this evening, is to get that cleaned up. Staff proposed amendments to the city's land use code for temporary signs, as seen in the attached red line, which is the first attachment that you have in your packet this evening. We added definitions for new terms to section 2016-205A. We changed section 2016-205B to address temporary commercial signs to give it commercial its own category. We added a new section, 2016-205C, addressing temporary non-commercial signs on both residential and non-residential properties. And then we added a new, we deleted section 2016-205C entitled Political Signs and added a new section 2016-205D entitled Election Period Sign Regulations. The last section within the temporary signs piece is the subdivision signs, and other than renumbering that section to section E, there were no proposed amendments to that particular set of regulations. On May 8th, these amendments were presented to the Planning Commission. They held a public hearing on the item, and they voted 6-0 to recommend approval of the proposed amendments to the temporary signs section of the sign code. The Planning Commission at that meeting did ask about temporary signs on city-owned property promoting certain events, and at that time I was still relatively new and didn't have that answer, so I thought I'd include that as part of this presentation. There are a couple of permits that are issued by the Community Services Department, the Recreation Park fence banners, as well as the hanging street banners, and those are given in the priority listed in the presentation above, which is City of Healdsburg events first, City of Healdsburg co-sponsored events, nonprofit organizations for Healdsburg community events, and other community events. Again, what we're asking of you this evening is to conduct a public hearing and introduce the first reading by title only, and waiving the further reading of the text, an ordinance amending Healdsburg Municipal Code Section 2016-205, temporary signs. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions on the specifics of the proposed amendments that I briefly outlined.
Could you explain the political signs in a little bit more, like just as simple as you can, what the difference will be?
The main difference is that we're not calling them political signs. They're non-commercial signs, so we're not looking at the content of those. We're still allowing for, and actually being a little bit more explicit because we hadn't done that in the past, for residential properties, up to 6 signs, in addition to the 2 that they're allowed to have by right. So those are 6 square feet in size and no higher than 4 feet in height. And then for non-residential properties, we allow up to 50 square feet in size. So you could have up to a 5 by 10 foot size sign. You're allowed to have it double face, so technically you get 100 square feet worth of messaging, or a combination of smaller signs adding up to that. So.
And another question I had was, for years, okay, I won't exaggerate, for at least a year, when I was coming into town, right where the roundabout starts, so like right there by Single Tree, to my right, there was a permanent sign, it seemed, for a real estate office, or not real estate, but a real estate project in town. And I wondered, do people they can just put those up? I mean, really, they can? So could our farmers market have a permanent sign when they first come on? It says Sorrento Square is coming, or, just coming around the corner, market's ahead. Can you do that? I mean, because it seemed like it was a permanent sign for a long time, and I was just curious how they had that right to do that, but then the farmers market can't put up a sign. I was just curious if that's going to change things now. And
I'm not familiar with that sign, but based on the description, that's something that should be a temporary sign and would be subject to abatement should someone complain.
Complaint-based deal, so
Yes.
We're not looking for it.
Correct.
So I could speak to that to some degree because there was a point in time where there was a number of those real estate signs. I think they're specific to projects in town, and it just becomes an enforcement issue. It's complaint based, and we'll try and pick them up when we can, but we don't always see those.
So if I sent a copy of it to y'all and you didn't respond, and my concern is just equity and just making sure. So I just want to make sure that this is going to clean some of that up, because people can complain and then it's going to come through. I mean, I understand it's a complaint-based system, but my concern is just the equity in it and just making sure people have a right. Like, our farmers market always wants a sign. So when we're coming into town, how would they be able to get a sign to the right if they wanted that? They'd go through community services probably, right? That would be the best avenue?
The community services just addresses those that are on city-owned land. And then there is a section in the code that allows for a temporary sign promoting local events, nonprofit type of events. They would need to get that actually I think is exempt. So, but the issue is the amount of time that it's up.
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out, because I'm getting asked from the farmers market people to actually have a sign when you first come to town that says farmers market ahead, and they were told they could never have that. And I was just curious how
So I think we're talking about 2 different issues with regards to what we're presenting to council tonight versus I think what the farmers market and a couple other folks in town have asked about, and that has to do with our more permanent sign requirements. This is phase 1 of this process. Phase 2 will be coming back to take a look at our entire sign ordinance, I believe, because we have to address everything because of the Gilbert case. So that's phase 2. But I don't believe what you're talking about, Madam Mayor, applies to what is being presented tonight.
So if you go back 2 slides, it says something about a priority order. Go back, yeah. So priority is given in the following order: City of Healdsburg events, City of Healdsburg co-sponsored, and nonprofit. Isn't that what we're talking about?
So you're talking about city-owned properties. So Planning Commission asked about temporary signs on city-owned properties promoting certain events. So those are specific to city-owned properties. When you drive by Rec Park and you see the signs there, or the banners there on the facing that intersection, that's what that applies to. It doesn't apply to private property.
It doesn't apply to the roundabout area.
Not if it's no.
Okay.
No.
All right.
I don't believe
Thank you. Thanks for answering that. Any other questions?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify with regard to political signs. That it does seem this ordinance extends the amount of time that political signs can be posted, correct? It says 90 days from the first day that people can vote. So I would read that as being 90 days from when absentee ballots are mailed out.
Oh, you know what? I don't know if it says that or if it says election day.
It says election period is defined as a period commencing 90 days before any national, state, or local election in which city electors may vote up to through the date of the election. So
that is an
sounds like
excellent question.
the first day they could vote would be when the absentee ballots are mailed out, I would think.
That's how I would interpret that, actually. Yeah.
And currently, I think our regulation is 60 days from before election day, right? So this is actually adding a month plus.
So that might have been an oversight, but I don't know that it's, I think that's fine. That interpretation is fine. If the council wanted to tighten that up and say election day instead of the language in there now, I think you could do that without
And
having
how
to
did
go
we
back
get
to the
from
commission.
60 to 90 days? Because I don't know if I'm totally psyched about that. It's a long time to have election signs up.
I'm looking at the language that was stricken from the political signs section, and at that point in time, it says any such sign shall be erected not earlier than 90 days prior to the election and shall be removed 15 days after the election. So I don't believe the time frame has changed.
So our prior regulation was 90? I thought it was 60.
I believe it was true that it has been 90, but there's been kind of an unwritten rule that nobody puts them up, in kind of the 45-day range. But that rule has been, the 90 has been used before.
I think it used to be a lot shorter back in the day.
I think it was down to 30 at some point,
Yeah,
but
it was 30.
It just kept creeping up to the 90 as the official.
Okay.
So just one more time, unwritten laws versus laws. If we're going to go through the trouble of going through a first step, I think we should look at that. Is there any concern about it being too long of a time for political signs? That's what I'm hearing.
So I want to clarify something. One of the reasons that we're coming to you to amend your ordinance is that your primary ordinance, like the ordinance of many cities in California, singled out political signs to be regulated. I don't know, it may have just been because it's a specific classification of signs that so that you could regulate them. Under the Gilbert case, we cannot regulate signs based on their content, so we cannot regulate political signs. And so what this ordinance does is it strikes those regulations from your ordinance now, and instead extends the time period for non-commercial temporary signs to be posted. It allows more of those signs to be posted within what it defines as the election period. So when we're talking about political signs being able to be posted, it's all signs more of all commercial, sorry, I'm losing my words, more of all commercial temporary signs can be posted during that time period.
But
doesn't have to be an election sign.
But by having it that it's the first day in which city electors may vote, that's adding an extra 30 days to the time that signs could go up.
I don't see it that way. If we want to really dice grammar, I think that the election period shall mean the period commencing 90 days before any national, state, or local election. Forget in which city electors may vote, because that's all that says is it defines what an election is up through the day of the election. So it's 90 days before the election, up through the day of the election. That's my grammatical interpretation of that rule. So if it's, you
Okay.
follow?
That's not how the sentence reads to me, but it sounds like it's a little ambiguous.
Well, we can.
It says 90 days
I'm
before
okay tightening it
when
up.
they may vote.
I'm okay
But
tightening
you
it
may
up.
cast a vote.
You may
but
cast a
it's not
vote,
being
like-
counted
There
until-
you go. Okay, bingo.
Okay, so I'd like to open it to the public for a public hearing. Open a public hearing, please. So would anyone like to come forward to have comment on the issue of this first step of the codification of some signs policies? Does anyone want to come up for this land use code amendment, temporary signs?
Seeing nobody, I'll move to close the public hearing.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, clearly passes. All right. So do we need to read?
I think I can just offer by title only, right?
Thank you.
So I will offer the ordinance by title only for first reading of the City Council of Healdsburg, amending Healdsburg Municipal Code Section 20.16.205 regarding temporary signs.
Second.
Councilmember Gold,
Yes.
Councilmember McCaffrey?
Yes.
Councilmember Naokis?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Higley?
Yes.
Mayor Mansell?
Yes. Okay, thank you so much. Thank you for helping us get things clear and making it more succinct. Appreciate it.
Thanks.
All right, moving on to old business. And our first item on old business is the Growth Management Ordinance Amendment. We're going to receive a staff report and consider any modifications if necessary, and by motion, we're going to perhaps direct staff to return with the following or revised ballot language for adoption at the June 18th, 2018 City Council meeting. And there is some language that has been proposed, and I believe that who will be presenting this from the staff?
This will probably be mostly Walter. I may kick it off a little bit. We don't have.
So Walter is who? What is his? What is his business? He works for. He's our consultant. Yes.
Right. So tonight we will have Walter Kieser of EPS, who we've had under contract for a couple years now, working on different growth management ordinance pieces, if you will. He really evaluates the economics of it, feasibility of it.
Thank you.
With regards to our planning staff, as I mentioned before, Ms. DeRosa is out. Ms. Krantz is out as well. And so it'll be myself and Walter from EPS presenting tonight. But for the most part, we'll start off with just the review of where we are today. I don't have the clicker. It's right there. Thank you. So I'll probably do the first, Walter, and then hand it off. So again, tonight, I think what we're really looking for is to provide direction to staff. The intent would be, if council wishes to proceed with the growth management or ballot measure, is to provide very narrow direction to staff with regards to what the language on the ballot should look like. And you see a draft in front of you there. The intent would be to come back on the 18th, not only with that, but also with an actual ordinance, draft ordinance to be adopted by resolution, which really has the nuts and bolts of what would be in the growth management ordinance. So there's really two pieces tonight we're looking for you to do, is really approve or provide direction with regards to the ballot language. And again, before you see what we came up with. And then in the staff report itself, in the body, and also in the presentation, you'll see kind of key components of what would be in the ordinance to be brought in front of the voters, if council wishes to proceed with that.
So just for clarification, so we is the staff. Who is included in the we?
With regards to
the language of this?
Actually, our city attorney. I work with the city attorney.
I drafted it.
You drafted it. Okay.
I did.
Thank you.
So.
And I've already noticed a typo.
So moving forward. Just in way of background, we've seen this before at the last two presentations. With regards to Measure M, it establishes new residential construction, average of 30 units per year with no more than 90 units over a 3-year period. Those units do not carry over. And just for point of reference, we are at the end of the 3-year cycle right now. So in 2019, we will start a new 3-year cycle with 90 units over a 3-year period, average of 30. We brought forward, when I say we, the city brought forward Measure R in 2016. And as we all know, that did not gain enough support to pass. How we got here, so this was brought up at the goal setting on March 26th to explore revisiting the GMO. We've done that. We then met with the Community Housing Committee to discuss their, I guess, everybody's concerns and opinions with regards to putting this on the November ballot. At the last council meeting, May 21st, we presented, actually when I say we, Mr. Kieser, EPS presented, along with staff, presented really the analysis of what it would look like based on, I believe it was capping the GMO at 140% of AMI. And we took a look at what the feasibility would be. And based on that analysis, we have come to where we are today. So the following proposal: continue the 30-unit growth management allocations per year as it is, allow for a maximum of 60 additional allocations per year. The additional 60 allocations must be restricted to multifamily rental units. The multifamily rental units would be price restricted anywhere from, I should say, up to 160% of AMI, average median income, and would not be subject to the city's inclusionary housing ordinance. And at that, I think I'll hand it off to Mr. Keiser.
Thank you, City Manager. So again, my name is Walter Keiser. I am a senior principal with Economic and Planning Systems, and I am the last person standing tonight. So I have the honor of making this presentation. It turns out that I have done much of my firm has done much
Walter,
of the.
Can you make sure you're speaking right into the mic?
Excuse me? Yeah, okay, sorry. This thing is stuck. Okay, there we go. So we've done much of the technical work. We've gone over much of this material that we will speak about tonight at the May 21st meeting. So I'm just happy to go through that. One thing, though, I would add in the way of background and some of the comments that have been made, the city has been actually working on this housing, and I have assisted the city over the last 3 or 4 years, the housing action plan, the housing element, and a variety of other efforts. So this housing topic is real. It's gone through a lot of work. There's been a lot of public discussion about it. So this didn't come out of left field somewhere. This is something that's a pressing issue for the city. And I think the council, as we've talked about at the last meeting, the city council here in Healdsburg has done a commendable job of addressing this problem and studying it and considering options based on my experience, my broad experience around the state working with other jurisdictions. That's some background that I think is important too. Okay, so one of the things that, one of the key topics about this particular amendment is this notion of looking at the so-called missing middle, the cohort of household income just above the moderate, which is truly affordable. And the idea here is to promote housing for this missing middle, which are families that work here and want to live here in Healdsburg, but may not be able to for lack of a housing product. And that's the whole logic of this particular proposal. So we looked at this topic and from an analytical perspective to try and understand the marketplace for these units, the affordability, and also whether or not this would quote unquote work. In the earlier analysis that we made, we also pointed out that taken by itself, this amendment to the growth management ordinance is not sufficient to achieve this end. There is the need for, as Commissioner Bottarini was suggesting earlier, perhaps amendments to the zoning ordinance, rezonings, and other efforts, collaborative efforts, to actually get this done. But it is a critical part because without those allocation for this particular kind of housing, that you simply don't have enough allocations to support the typical sized project. So that's something that's pretty important here. And the other factor is that in this market analysis, this particular cohort has options, and in looking for housing, they can, even though they may work here, they can move to Windsor or Cloverdale or Geyserville, and also they can. They may have a preference for purchasing homes one way or the other, and certainly at the higher end of that range, they would have that capacity here in other parts of Sonoma County. Next. Okay, so the whole idea of a rent limit is the idea that follows on from affordable housing, truly affordable housing, where you're required by the public subsidies involved, the tax credit, to regulate and maintain affordability. These restrictions, these rent qualifications and restrictions, can be problematic, particularly for middle and let alone missing middle families. Something that we've seen here recently with the Citrine project there on Dry Creek. But that being said, with respect to this particular proposal, we have the ability to be somewhat flexible there to try and make those qualifications as least onerous as possible so that it doesn't become too much of a deterrent for people being willing to be in these rent-restricted units. Next. Can you flip the switch there? There we go. Just for purposes of the analysis, this is in the staff report, of course. This just shows where these rent limits lie. This is for a three-person family. That varies, of course, by 1, 2, 3, 4. But we just picked 3 as a kind of small family example. And you'll notice that the difference between a moderate income family and that of a middle at 160, maybe $800 a month in excess. So this just gives you a current data on what these rent limits would be based on the percentages of AMI that we look at in affordable housing. One of the other topics that comes up in the language is the notion of wanting these units to be average in one fashion or another, the 140, not at the cap and not at the bottom. And we've looked at this, and one of the things we looked at in the prior analysis as well is how close to a market rate of rent might that be, and we concluded that it was probably right about in the range. That is to say, at 140, it's pretty much at market, and interestingly, current market, I should say, rents. And then interestingly, also about the amount that we thought would be necessary to attract construction. You need a certain rent threshold to attract the capital investment and all to build the units. And so that 140 is kind of right there, where right in the middle. Too much below that might not be able to, it would be below market, and also might deter construction. At 140 and above, it seems to us that you're basically in the market range of rents and should be adequate based on our analysis to encourage or promote construction here in town, given the other factors involved, such as land availability and entitlements and all those sorts of things. We think, though, that because of the fact that these rents in this range are kind of in the market range, that any effort to try and qualify or to force a rental property owner to average the units at 140 might be a deterrent. So that's just something that we mention here in the way of considering how this might work. We feel that in that range that the market will operate, and it's likely, given the size of units and other things that will be involved in these projects, that the market will naturally adjust right around the middle there. And so it probably may not be necessary, and in fact, it may be deleterious to require rental owners to hit that average. There are other ways of getting that average unit size and other factors you may have control over in the entitlement process. Another feature of the direction had to do with 60 units a year. This number we arrived at from a variety of perspectives, primarily the fact that rental projects are in today's market are going to want to be somewhere in that 40 to 60 range in order to have a project that is of adequate scale to invite investment. And so that was the number that was chosen. It also gives you the ability to have these units available so that when a project that may be smaller or larger comes along, that you have the units to offer, which is not the case right now. The lack of these units and the lack of these allocations for a larger project, such as is required for a multifamily rental project to occur, simply are not available at this time. Here we are at the ballot language, which I think that you've already read. So this is the test. And basically converting this into the actual amendment, thanks to the city attorney's efforts. And the final point is that there are alternatives here, of course. You can have us order staff or direct staff to increase or decrease that cap. You can change the 60 unit higher or lower at your discretion, and then of course make some decision about this 3-year cycle. One of the aspects of the current ordinance, which is a bit problematic, is that units expire and then you can't even get to the minimum amount of growth that the growth management ordinance set forth. And we know that you've lagged in that over years for a variety of reasons. Of course, the final option is not to do this at all, which is always the option. So there we are. Next steps, you want to go over that?
Sure, I'll go into that. So next steps, as we mentioned before, would be to, by motion, adopt the language or provide direction to staff regarding the language, the changes which you may come up with. If there's things you'd like to see put in or addressed in the actual ordinance that's as part of the staff report, provide direction for that. We need to come back on the 18th, and actually we'll have the language which you give to us tonight, which we'll ask you to formally adopt by resolution, which will also include a draft copy of the ordinance. We need to have CEQA on that, the actual ordinance itself, and that will start that process as part of that. We would then come back on August 6th. It takes about 5 to 6 weeks for the consultant to do the analysis, the CEQA analysis, so there really is it's not necessary to have a meeting in July specific to this item anyway. And then we come back in August to adopt the resolution establishing, putting this actually on the November ballot. We have to get this to the county, I believe, by August 10th. I'm not sure I'm looking at. Yes, by August 10th. So that is the drop dead date. With that, I think we've talked about this at length, and we have Mr. Keyser here. Staff can answer any questions we possibly can, and at this point, we'd be happy to take any questions.
Okay, are there any questions? Because I have some, but I don't want to start. So we want to start? Councilman Neokis, thank you. Thank you again for being here to help us understand the numbers.
You're welcome.
A quick question about the 60 per year. What brought you to the 60?
I can jump. That came from council.
No, I know, but what you said that there was a particular economic viability. What explain that economic viability? I think partly is for folks who haven't been.
Indeed, it was your direction, but it was derived from work that we had done as a part of the earlier analysis, suggesting that we felt that you need a certain number of a typical multifamily project. It's going to vary in size, but in order to attract a typical modern project, it has to have a certain scale.
Right.
40, 60 would be considered a small rental project, actually, in the urban parts of the United States where we work. So it was really informed by that. You need enough units to be able to offer to somebody to build a whole project.
Right. Yeah. But it really is a project-focused number, not. So you're recommending the yearly cap based on a project number?
Well, the two things are related. We're simply saying that if you want to have enough units available to encourage this kind of construction, the minimum numbers should be somewhere in the range of what a real project would be.
Right. But one of the options that we're considering here is to have the number will be an average of 60 over a 3-year period.
Yes. And again, that gives you flexibility. What if somebody comes in and says, I'll only build a project, but my project has 70 units? Then that gives you the flexibility to allow that to happen. The following year, it'll be 0. Maybe the following year after that, it'll be 0. So right. Because the other thing that's important about multifamily rental housing is it's very cyclical, and opportunities come and they go based upon national trends, financing, and a whole variety of other factors. So you need to move when opportunities arise.
Right. I guess where I'm going with this line of questioning is there any argument to be made for splitting up the yearly average from the project cap? So in other words, let's say we consider a yearly average of 50 with a project cap of 65. So that would mean that over a 3-year period, you can have 2 65 unit projects and 1 20 unit project, and we're all good.
Yeah, I think one of the other features we have in the ordinance has to do with these policies and procedures. And it seems to me that some of those kind of details could be worked out as a matter of those policies and procedures rather than constraining yourself too much. I think what we should focus on is objectives, which are getting this stuff built, recognizing all of the factors and difficulties.
Right. Yeah. Well, I guess I'm also thinking objectives, effectiveness, but I'm also thinking, convincing the voters to actually.
Yeah, sure. And whatever that takes, I don't provide political advice.
Right, of course.
but the logic behind what we're doing here is to allow you to have the flexibility to approve projects of real scale.
Yep, gotcha. Thank you.
So if I could add, Councilmember, just to look at some projects we have in Healdsburg, which we discussed today. Canyon Run Apartments, 51 units. That's on it's a large lot on 6 acres. When you take a look at the units on Foss Creek Court Apartments, that's the 64 units, the Eden Housing, that's on 3.2 acres. So we have large-scale projects, when I say large-scale for Healdsburg, larger-scale projects on smaller properties, but we have moderate scale on larger parcels as well. So we do have a history in Healdsburg of these, I don't want to call them, I'll call them large projects from Healdsburg standards, but we do have those size projects currently built today. Now, of course, those are all affordable units, and that's why they're able to get the allocations. But just to give you a perspective of size and scale, that's a good example.
Hey, any other questions from the dais before we open it up? Yes, please, Vice Mayor.
I just wanted to confirm the cost. So staff report, it says the election costs will be in the range of $39.91 to $9,978. Environmental review is about $18,000, and then the GMO amendment analysis is about $12,000. Correct. So that's about $40,000. So for a 40-unit building, that's about $1,000 a unit that we would, if we go through this process and we get a 40-unit building constructed, it ended up costing the city about $1,000 a unit. That's kind of where it breaks down to. Okay. I just wanted to clarify.
Okay.
And just to clarify for me, multifamily units are, I know these are going to be apartments. The way this is written, it's definitely a rental product. But one of the questions I keep coming against is just, I don't get, multifamily units could be they could all be 160. Is that correct? 160, someone could build, I know we're not going to give them an average, but so say you come along, you go, I can't pencil this, it's all going to be 160. Is that plausible?
No.
Because we're not going to put an average in, or we are?
No, because the person who is renting these units is operating in a marketplace. And there's a market that's going to dictate price, not some imaginary number called 160. If he or she has this property, they're going to have to rent to what people will pay. And it's likely that there'll be a range in that, and it'll be determined by typical market interactions. There's also the fact that you're going to have different sized units, studios, 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, et cetera, and other ways. So it isn't a situation where an owner can simply say, well, I would like to get $3,000 a month, and that's great, except what happens if the market's 25, So again, I am, from a pure market perspective, not concerned about somebody, sort of gaming the system to only charge at 160. We've already pointed out that 160 is above current markets and also above the likely cost of actually constructing the units.
But you did have a slide on here, and I have been reading over and over that there is a 160. So I'm kind of concerned. Can you go back to your third slide where it said that it's not feasible to go 160 to do an average, correct? I think it said something about the fees. No, next one, sorry, forward. Requiring an average of 140 may similarly affect feasibility. So I keep hearing that 140 as an average, because that was what the council had talked about at one point, that we were, that would have been maybe more palatable for some of us.
Right.
So I guess I'm just questioning, feasibility, and that's an interesting word, and it's subjective, and certainly there can be changes, and you're trusting the market, or you're saying it's not about imaginary numbers. But I live in Healdsburg, and I know the market. It's pretty intense. It's pretty predictably high. So unless something changes a lot, so I guess I have more understanding. I guess when we get into the weeds of the details, because I understand you want to keep this super simple. We have a narrow action tonight. We're just basically going to say, do we like the language? But I'm just concerned about that, putting the language to be 160. I'm just wondering the feasibility of that. You know, if it's going to really attract, because you're suggesting there's a marketplace out there to go under 140
Well,
without subsidizing.
yeah, my sense is that the marketplace will function in this range. That's my sense, and based on my experience. And so I really, now that being said, I think that you have other ways, there will be other ways. These are all projects that require discretionary permits, and you're going to have all kinds of ways you can influence this by the size of units, affordability by design, and these sorts of things. And the market is going to be competitive if you start building these units and they're actually available. It's going to influence price at some point. And so I feel that that I have some confidence. I'll just say that given this range, the actual pricing is going to happen in that 121 to 160. It's all in the range of a market, and I believe that that is likely to be the case.
Can I make a comment?
Vice
So,
Mayor,
as I understand, I think one of the things we need to keep in mind is when you're talking about feasibility, you're talking about feasibility of constructing and building it. And so today, based on today's analysis, the market rent is at about 140% AMI. I think what he's saying is if we're limiting the feasibility to, part of the reason we bumped the cap up to 160 is to give room, say market moves up to 145 or 150, without that extra bit of cushion, it could affect the feasibility of a construction project being able to be built.
Right.
So once it's built, I believe your point is that the rents will settle to where the market is, and then there'll be other things. I mean, from what I've seen, you know, people are building more, you know, like where the need is with 2 bedrooms or studios or 1 bedrooms, and those will start to pull the overall cost down. You may be in the AMI range, but that'll pull the rent down. Just, you know, the 1 bedroom doesn't cost as much as a 2 bedroom and so on.
I think the point of having the 160 limit is just to assure the voters that we are not going to be encouraging the construction of some sort of an ultra luxury product. That these are going to be products that are aimed pretty close to where the rental market is.
Yeah.
Now, I have some issues just with the wording of the ordinance. Would it be appropriate to discuss that at this point?
We open it for public comment before, or do you
It's
want
up
to
to
go
you.
to wording?
I would suggest maybe going to comment just in case there's other suggestions, but I'll leave
Do
it
you
to
want
the
to go
mayor.
for wording? I'm open to that, but I want to open
It's
to
not,
public
if it's not premature, there's just a couple things stand out
Okay,
to me about
of
the
course.
wording.
Go.
So when I look at the actual proposed amendment, and we're looking at the wording, which has been conveniently printed in red for us here. So two, subject to that the apartments constructed would be subject to a regulatory agreement with the city requiring the tenants earn between 121 and 160% of Sonoma County area median income. I don't see any reason to have a lower limit there. I would prefer it just to say that they earn not more than 160%. Because if somebody earns 115, but you know they need a place to live, why would they be not allowed? That doesn't make sense to me. So I would prefer that change be made, that you only talk about the upper limit but not the lower. And also, it seems to me that there should be wording in the ordinance about the rental cap, because that's really the most significant thing about it. And I'm not seeing it here. It's mentioned in the question, but it's not mentioned in the actual ordinance. I'm not seeing it.
You understand the question, City Attorney?
I don't. What do you mean by the rental cap?
Well, that basically they can't charge more than 30% annually of what someone making 160% AMI makes. That's the whole point, that it's capped at an affordability level that someone making not more than, making under 160% of AMI can afford if they're paying 30% of their annual income in for rent.
Sure, that's fine to include. I don't feel like that's been discussed before. So if you would, where would the council like to include it? In the ballot language or in the ordinance?
I think it should be in the ordinance because that's the part that has the teeth. And I mean, it's already mentioned in the question, although I think that could be made a little more clear when it says rents capped 160%. That, I don't think people know what that means exactly. So we might need to be a little bit more explanatory there as well.
That's the challenge, is we're trying to be as broad and specific, if I can use
Yes,
that
I
term, at the same
understand.
time. But I think that's the challenge the city attorney and I were having, going back and forth as far as how do we get what I believe what the intent of the ballot language is, excuse me, what the intent of the ballot measure is, but also have a relatively simple.
Yeah, so I mean, my prime concern is that it be in the ordinance that there is a rental cap on these units. And that's the main point, more than the income cap.
And so the rental cap would be 30% of whatever their monthly.
30% of the annual income of someone making 160 of AMI.
Just to clarify, because I'm at about 100 or 120 AMI in my salary range, so use a concrete example. So my question is, how do I get in the unit? I have to give you my paycheck from Sonoma County Office of Education, or not you, but whoever's going to, not you, Walter, of course not, but certainly the person that is going to be developing this property is going to have to check in on mine because we're doing deed restriction. So they will know my income, and then I just every month have to prove it, or?
Well, first of all, no, these days, no one rents anybody anything without having a paycheck. So, I mean, just to rent anything, you have to make, no matter what, you're obliged to provide financial information. That's standard no matter what. Luxury, low, whatever. So you need to demonstrate that you have an income or all that. So this topic, though, is not just in qualification. There would be a requirement, a deed restriction on these units that the owner of the units, the person renting the units, would have to certify that the people renting are in that category, and the city would have some obligation to keep track of that. One of the questions is, well, how do you deal with that over time? It's certainly not once a month, but it might be. And we, in the case of the tax credit deals, it's an annual certification. In this case, we may not do that. We may not have to do that. And by the way, that's another reason for having that 160% cap, because that gives families an opportunity to make a little more money and not have to move out of their units. That's one of the reasons why some of those moderate income units are not subscribed, simply because the people are right on the edge there, and they don't want to move into a home and have to move out because they get a pay raise. So in this case, we can use the policies and procedures to create a system of certification which is flexible and avoids those kinds of problems.
Yeah, I concur with Councilmember Gold on the language of up to 160, and also on language in there about having a mix or a range or a balance within that income, right? I think it was pretty clear from our last discussion at the council that we didn't want everything to be at the 160 rail, so to speak, that it would be, we would strive for an average of 140, but I think that saying, in my opinion, I think that saying an average of 140 and having that as a number in there is too restrictive. In that, if it came in at 145 or 135, as long as there's a range in there and it provides an opportunity for people, that's what I'm after.
So would a mix of income levels be satisfactory? Some reference somewhere in the ordinance?
Yes. And then, I'm just interested in hearing from the public as well.
So are there any other questions before we open? Okay, I really want to open this to public comment at 7:34. And I'm happy to hear from anyone now. We invite you to come up. We have a 3-minute rule, and if we please state your name, and we welcome your conversation and public input, please. So welcome.
Good evening, council members. I hope you read my letter to you. I don't often write what I'm going to say, but I wanted to be clear and kind of expand on my suggestion that you not do this at this time. In 2000, the GMO passed with the promise of controlling growth. This was in the backwash and highly visible changes in Parkland Farms and around the plaza with the construction of the hotel. The goal was to limit growth to 1%. However, the structure of the measure actually reduced the production of multifamily units to practically zero. And we grew at approximately 0.5%. And that points to the 217 unused allocations that rolled off because of the way the measure was structured. Alan Cohen's suggestion of a measure that might only recapture those 217 allocations, which would keep us within 1% growth over the last 20 years, and not let allocations roll off, which would allow us to stay within 1% growth, would be something that you might consider passing now. But more importantly, I don't think you have a plan to actually use these. And what I am concerned about, that what you're proposing has three major weaknesses arising from the uncertainty of outcomes. And Walter's presentation made clear that there's a great deal of uncertainty in what you're proposing to do. In his language, the proposal should generate capital investment. Other factors you may consider through the entitlement process might make it easier to get the result you want. My sense is, or I have some confidence, that the market will operate in this range. What I propose to you in my column from the Tribune is to use an asset you already have and structure something that will allow the community to be the builder of the units on the 10 acres at Montage, or the 14 acres. And the reason I suggest that is because what you're proposing does not necessarily guarantee that the commercial entity that is the entire city of Healdsburg requires people to be able to hire people, and those people have to find homes. And people are having difficulty now hiring people as teachers, doctors, nurses, physical therapists, firemen, policemen, because it's onerous to take a job here when you can't live here. And I think that you could engage the commercial interests in our sphere of influence by carrying the cost of land and letting an entity like the Housing Land Trust own the land, raise the capital to build the houses, and there could be affordable units in a project out there, not just market houses. And they could be, in fact, leased then to businesses at a controlled level so that they could have homes for the people who want to work at Healdsburg Hospital or at the schools or for the fire department, and they could be guaranteed a place to live when they accepted a job. I think you're taking risks and you haven't evaluated the risk, because if this goes to the ballot and the people don't see how it's going to happen, I don't know that you'll do any better at the ballot than you did with Measure R. And I worked really hard on Measure R.
Richard, great.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Who else would like to give us some input? Very important thing is to have public input. So we invite you to come forward, please. Thank you.
Jim Winston, Healdsburg. I've spoke to each and every one of you a number of times during this, what I would say, lobbying process. And it seemed that, what we all seem to agree on is that we need to work hard and try to find some common ground and some compromise. And I felt really comfortable with, the results that I felt that I received from council members, in that direction. So, we're prepared to make a compromise, something that'll work for the city, and it'll work for, the voters. It seemed that we'd like to see a cap of 50 units. And these are the things that would lead us to endorse and to help and to support the proposed amendment. And I think that's where we all want to go. We want to find some results from all of our hard work. So we'd like to see a 50 cap, and most importantly on that is that that's 50 per year. I'm bitterly opposed to the 180 over a 3-year period of time. Because what that would do, somebody could come in and build a 125 unit or 150 unit or 180 unit apartment in 1 year and not build anything for the next 2 years. And I see that, one of the things that's really important to me personally is that, we build within the scale of our little city. Rather than building these giant projects that are out of scale for Healdsburg, we need to focus on smaller projects, and they work just as well. Developers will complain that they don't pencil, they can't make money. They're not being honest with you. They'll all tell you and cry poor so they can get concessions, and it works. I've done it. And I don't think you should get misled by that. The developers will build it by virtue of, there's 3 developers right now that are building $100 million plus projects. They're here, they're making money. They put a lot of money down, they bought all this property, and they bought it because they know they can make money. And anything that you hear short of that is not being honest. So again, what's important is stay with a 50 cap per year, okay? And then we'd like to see 140 AMI average, which I think is reasonable. It's compromise. We're talking about compromise here. We're all not going to get what we want, but we got to find some compromise. And of course, it has to be deed restricted. I'm thinking approximately 55 years would work. And then on the other side of this, if we're to work for this thing and be proactive and endorse and help sponsor, our new proposed amendment, we need to get some compromise. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. All right, anyone else like to speak? Welcome.
Good evening, Council, staff. I just want to thank you for revisiting this continuing need to provide affordable housing. We've heard a lot of approaches. Measure R, as we know, didn't pass. That got rid of the cap altogether. The GMO has had a low cap and not provided affordable housing. This is a cap of 60, which may provide more. But I have a more fundamental question. Irrespective of which of these approaches will do the job, how much, given the fact we know there's very little land left to put in residential housing of any type, how much is left, how much land is left in terms of number of residential units before we exceed our growth boundaries by any approach? And number 2, how much land that is currently not zoned for residential, but for some other use, can be changed by our planning commission and by our council to make it available, and how many additional houses. So I think we need to know where we're going with the maximum amount. People are worried about growth, but I think the growth is limited just by our boundaries, and I think we need to know some of those numbers in addition to talking about how we get there.
Thank you. Welcome.
Hi, Mark Decker, Healdsburg. Listening to the presenter here, Mr. Keyser, I do look at the importance of looking at the regional concept, because if you're determining how many people you want to live in Healdsburg and work in Healdsburg, currently I think it's around 33%. And if you want to have more people living in Healdsburg, what is that percentage? Do you want 50? Do you want 40? Do you want 75? At what level, at what point, do you do a calculation that says what's the housing requirements for the number of people you want to work in Healdsburg? Is it going to be restricted to certain fields of work, or is it going to be just anybody who wants to live here? So I think that's a factor that you have to consider. Otherwise, the regional concept is the other choice. You have to determine that. Secondly, is that when you look at the missing middle, you have to kind of look at the fact is that what is the difference between a person who is a missing middle renter and a person who is a missing middle purchaser? The idea is that all that is usually is the size of the down payment that they have saved. Because you can have a person making 140% of the AMI, and if they have $350,000 or $400,000 that they've saved up or somehow gotten over the course of time, they're going to be able to buy into a affordable unit that currently is not available in Healdsburg. So really, I'm saying is that if you focus on multifamily rental units only, you're making a big mistake. I really feel you have to mirror what the community is going to need over a period of time. Because if you strictly look at just what 160 or 140 can buy in a rental scenario, you're missing the very fabric of people who are coming here from other areas that might have a major down payment due to inheritance or a rich uncle, or they were able to amass that amount of money over a period of time through other sales of properties and things that they end up in Healdsburg with. So I would really urge the council to look at the fact is that you're trying to put people in a box here, and I don't think it's really easy to do that. I feel you really have to broaden the scope to allow for housing starts to be both purchased properties and rental properties. And I think the size, you come up with that number on how much is going to do what, but those two factors really have to be considered. How many people do you want to have working and living in Healdsburg? What is that number? Because it's 33% or thereabouts right now. And where are the rest of them going to live? That's why the regional concept is so important when you start thinking about that. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Welcome. Thank you.
Hello, Bob Gain, resident of Healdsburg for 20 years. I'm also on the Housing Commission, as well as a board member of the Healthcare Foundation. And I do want to applaud the City Council for taking this up. I think it's a fantastic directive because, as we know from just even our Constitution, it was written over 200 years ago, and we constantly amend it. And I think to the extent that right now we are facing a severe housing crisis, not only in California, in Northern California, but in Sonoma County. We've lost 6,000 homes in Sonoma County. And for me, the quality of this community is going to be based on the people that can afford to live here and the people that actually want to work here. And I hear more and more stories about individuals who and companies who can't hire people because they can't actually place individuals in the community. And I think to the extent that you're focusing on rental housing, that's fantastic because that's the kind of housing that we actually need right now. And we can't just close the gate to this community and say nobody else can move here, because the reality is that we actually need people to live here. We can, if people complain about traffic, the reason why there's traffic is because people are having to commute in to work here. And, so I think that the fact that we can try to get to a point where we have enough housing for all types here is going to be super important. And I do think that something that the gentleman mentioned earlier, I'm actually not in favor of a yearly cap, because I think to the extent if we're saying that whether it's 50 or 60 units on average a year, if somebody comes in and says, I want to build 120, I want to build 160 units, and that's all we get for 3 years, wouldn't we rather have that than somebody just saying, oh, I can only build 50, and then for the other 2 years we don't get anyone? I mean, I just think that any amount of housing that we get to help lower income and middle income families is important. So again, thank you for taking this up, and I support your efforts on this.
Thank you. Good evening. Welcome.
Alan Cohen, Center Street, Mayor Mansell and council members. I get the sense that you're going to make a decision tonight. I think some of the comments are valid and make sense, but I think you're poised to move on, so I'll focus on what's in front of you. I'm a little bit skeptical that it's going to lead to apartment builders wanting to come to town just because there's other options in the county, probably better locations, less money to buy the land, bigger job markets, and less obstacles. So my encouragement is to limit those obstacles to get the best opportunity for this to actually work. So I would agree that the language be up to 160. Forget the floor. That doesn't really help. I would suggest not including an average in the language, because I think, as Walter mentioned, it will sort itself out. And I think that there's going to be a range in there, and the market will somewhat control that. And I would also encourage you, not in the ballot language, but when you get to the policies and procedures, the actual ordinance, that you consider qualifying people when they move in, and that's the last time you qualify them. You don't have an annual audit, which we don't have to do because this is not strictly affordable. It seems to me that if someone makes a raise, they shouldn't have to move out, whether it's an annual audit or a 5-year audit. People will move out over time. There'll be turnover. Every time someone moves in, they have to comply with that cap. But, I've talked with employers who have employees in restricted housing, and they game the system by, they don't get a raise, but they give them some other benefits, and it doesn't seem like the right way to move forward. And by the annual audit, to me, is a big impediment for an apartment owner or developer, because you're going to have to hire a consultant to do a lot of work. It just makes it that much harder. I wouldn't get into the 30% business in any kind of ballot language. That's part of the ordinance and the details, because there's a lot of complications there. You got to include the utilities and any other monthly expenses, and it gets complicated. You got to keep it simple. And if there's some way to, I would encourage you to eliminate the loss after the 3-year cycle. So going forward, at least, it rolls over from year to year, so we don't run into the same problems that we ran into this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome.
Good evening, Deborah Kravitz, Healdsburg. I just wanted to echo some things that some of the other speakers said. As far as the number of units, we're talking about capping it. I'm agnostic as long as it's over about 40, so that it will pencil out and developers will have the critical mass they need to actually build a unit. But I do think it's important that we allow units to roll over that are unused, so that we don't lose them, as we have done with the single-family units under the current GMO restrictions. I also think it's important that we do allow a 3-year average because of the cyclical nature of building and the fact that, there just may not be someone every year to do this. So I think it's important that we do, within the 3-year cycle, allow, we want to cap it at an average number, but not necessarily cap it every year at a certain number. I also think it's very important that if the council is going to move forward with this amendment, that you also look at some of the other things that the city can be doing in the meantime to make it more palatable and more likely that someone will actually build this housing. And just as one example, I think we need to up the maximum density per acre. It's right now, I think, at 20, which is below average, as I understand it, for most communities. So taking on additional actions such as that, I think, will help this. If you're going to go forward with this amendment and it passes, we want to do the other things around it to make it more likely that it'll be successful and that this housing will be built.
Thank you. All right. Anyone else like to come up and address the GMO ballot amendment initiative?
Good evening.
Thank you.
Mayor Mansell and fellow city council members. I'm really here to just encourage you to go ahead and do this. But I think that modifying the GMO, you're going to provide a path forward to restoring balance in Healdsburg. It's one step of many steps, and it's part of the puzzle that we have to solve, as you well know. And I always go back to the need, and I appreciate the comments about what the need is. And as staff report indicated, we have a need between somewhere 290 and 530 units for low and moderate. That's our greatest need. It's really clear. We've said that 100 times. But we also have a need that's arranged from 125 to 250 units. This is over a 5-year period, according to my understanding of the report. And in order to do that, we need some additional tools to create the kind of housing that will permit more people who work in Healdsburg to live in Healdsburg, and enable more families to live in Healdsburg, people who currently are priced out of the market and who don't qualify for low and moderate income housing. We and you have the opportunity, when we combine this with market rate housing, with low and moderate income housing, with this missing middle, to create developments or create planned unit areas in our town where we have mixed incomes, where we reflect the diversity of the people who work here, where we can do some great design, some great siting. And I highly recommend that you do seek a balance between 120 and 160 of AMI so that we don't end up with more units at the higher end. But I think the operative word here is balance, and it be in the policies and procedures. Or you could add language to the ballot that just says, and a balance between 121 and 160%. I think the voters would really be much more comfortable with that. So it would assure them that if in their mind's eye they're thinking, oh, well, this is going to be at the high end, that you're clearly saying a signal that it's towards the middle. So I know I'm going to run out of time. So I don't think there's a lot of downside to this modification, but it is experimental. If we do create more middle income housing, boy, that's terrific. If we don't, we have not used up our precious limited amount of land, and we can make the modifications that are necessary. So you're going to send a message when you do this to our community that you are taking constructive steps to address the lack of affordable and middle income housing. And there's the issue of where's the land. We all know that we have land that can be developed. It's just a matter of us changing our general plan, doing rezoning. We have the south entry, the north entry. We have existing areas that can be rezoned. We have some developments coming along that could have more intensive housing. So I highly encourage you to move forward because I think it is a progressive and really necessary part of solving the puzzle. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else like to come up and share any thoughts or questions or input? We're inviting you now. This is the public comment section. Welcome.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. My name is Tim Unger, Plaza Street. I agree with what Richard Berg had to say, which it's time to wait. I agree with what Jim Winston had to say, where we have to manage our numbers. I agree with what Deb Kravitz said, where density is important. We have to take that into account. And I agree with what Todd Everett said about balance. Specifically in terms of numbers, I'd like to see a cap at 50. I think rolling it over takes things out of balance. I think when you look at being able to build up to 180 over a 3-year period and having a project of that size, that's clearly not in keeping with what Healdsburg is today or what the majority of the electorate wants. And that's something to clearly keep in mind, if you would, please. Character of this town's important. And again, we need to figure out a way to solve the housing challenge, particularly at the lower end. Talking about the missing middle is laudatory, I believe, but at the same time, we have many, many workers in town in the hospitality industry and in the farm industry, which I really haven't heard much spoken about, that needs to be addressed. So as Mr. Everett says, some kind of balanced range between 120 and 160 might help some of that happen. I'm under the impression there's a developer who submitted a plan or is in the process of submitting a plan, 170 units. He's a landowner south of the bridge. This certainly would let something like that happen. Is that really something that is Healdsburg? And I'll leave you with that. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else like to come forward and speak? We're inviting you. All right. Welcome.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. Marilyn Joyce, Healdsburg. So I'm going to step back a little bit. Our housing situation is not our housing situation. It's a housing situation all over the world. And it's usually caused by outside investors. In our case, it might be second homers and the tourist industry. In other cities around the world, it might be immigration. In concept, I agree with Mr. Cohen's one-time income evaluation. Just having been a renter and you know, the risk and the stress that causes if you think you can't climb. I'm looking at the 140% AMI, average mean income. Why, this is rhetorical, I realize, but 100% average mean income to me would be the middle. And so when we talk about 140, you know, that's another income level that you're calling missing middle. I'm wondering, are the majority of the jobs that are provided in Healdsburg 140 AMI, or are they below? And if we want to serve the people that are in Healdsburg, then we should be looking at the average income of people who are working here and can't live here. And please don't let people continue to say that there's no more buildable land in Healdsburg, because as you all know, most homeowners have buildable land in their backyards. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to address this topic of the Growth Management Ordinance Amendment, ballot language, proposal, specifics? Anybody? All right, since no one is speaking or coming forward or indicating anything, I'm going to go ahead and close public comment and come back to the dais. So I've been asked for someone to go first. So
thank you, Madam Mayor. I think that where a lot of what we're doing here, I think is on the right track. As I said before, I think having the everything deed restricted to 160% up to 160, and having a balance, I think, is important to have that in the language. And I think Mr. Everett said it really well. A balance between the 120 and the 160, I think, is something that people can understand. I think that there's a lot of different ways. There's a lot of different things that I can think of how to make these happen. But there's also, you know, the ingenuity that I know that our housing committee, our council, our staff have. And I think that we'll figure out a way to do these units and make them part of, you know, larger developments. And, you know, I have a lot of hope that we can create these units and partner with people to create them and make them happen. And, you know, let's not kid ourselves that this is going to be a lot of work. And we're going to have to work at it, because yes, there are easier paths for people to build stuff, but Healdsburg's a special place, and I believe that the developers will want to come here like they do with so many of the other things that we do here in town. I also support a concession of sorts to go to 50 units per year with an average of 50 units per year, with 150 for every 3 years. I think that the lessening it by 10 is insignificant compared to the political capital that it does with you heard a number of speakers, Mr. Winston, Mr. Unger, talking about that. I think that giving that up, giving those 10 units a year up, will build an enormous amount of goodwill, and I don't think it will affect the probability of having a project of some scale built. I also think that a lot of the things that we've talked about are, and I think Mr. Keyser talked about them as well, that they should be in policies and procedures. I think like the size of a project. I can think of the one here behind the trees that's 65 units, and but what about a mixed project? Where there's some market rate in there too. Having the flexibility, I think, is very important. We also have. I don't want to get into the weeds of the ideas that I have for how to make these happen, but just I have some ideas, and I'd be happy to share them. But I think there's probably a lot more out there, and we have a lot of good minds out there in the community that are rooting for us. And so tonight, I think the biggest thing is I would just encourage the balance language in there, and I would also encourage moving to a 50 unit per year and 150 unit per 3-year period in the spirit of the original growth management ordinance going forward. Thank you.
Can I just one point of clarification? Because this question will be asked of all 5. Do you want those unused allocations after that 3-year period to roll over, or do you want it to stop?
I do not want them to roll over.
Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and again ask for council members to chime in. So I'm going to ask for Councilwoman Gold, please.
Okay, so I concur with Councilmember McCaffrey that 50 units is a more palatable number to a large portion that at least the people who've been talking to us seem to prefer that number. That I don't think that should be a sticking point. I'm willing to go for that. I think out of simplicity, we should just keep it the same as the current GMO, that it's a 3-year cycle and then it expires. I think people are used to that in the current GMO, and maybe that will be comfortable for them. I'm not worried about, some massive project coming in that's inappropriate, because the project still has to go through all the planning process that any project has to do. It's not like we're just helpless to control it because the GMO permits it. I just see this as giving the city another tool with which to negotiate with developers. They'll say, we would like you to include this product type, and allotments are available. Will you do it? And then you can, at that point, you can kind of negotiate on the types of the units, the size of the units that are going to help dictate the price. I'm not in favor of putting in restrictive language about averaging, because I feel it's just another obstacle. And our consultant has said that 140 is just sort of a borderline place, for an apartment to be built. So I wouldn't be in favor of that. I do feel the market, rental market, is going to somewhat, control that, and there will be a spread. There'll be probably studios at one level and 2 bedrooms at another level, and maybe some 3 bedrooms at the top level. Some such arrangement as that is what I assume that the builders would probably want to do, rather than doing all at the top level. So are there any other? Deed restriction, I don't actually see any wording in the ordinance about deed restriction.
Regulatory agreement.
Okay. All right.
Secret code for deed restriction.
Okay,
but
got
your
it.
question
Regulatory
indicates that maybe we
restriction.
should write that more clearly.
Thank you for clarifying that. And is there anything else that you need us to weigh in on?
Well, there's one thing that I believe you brought up earlier before public comment was this 30%.
Mm-hmm.
You might have seen us kind of talking during the public comment, trying to understand what the implications of that would be. We're unclear what those implications would be. We would want to come back and spend a little more time evaluating that, I think. Is that right?
Yes, I just wanted to make a point that this is very normal. That is to say, when we're doing this as a part of a tax credit deal, the 30% is the standard that HUD applies, and it's a given, basically. And so it's not, we don't
have to spell it out.
We really don't have to say it.
Thank
It's
you.
something we can put in the regulatory procedures.
That's exactly what I was going to suggest. If council support, that's something I would take a look at putting in the policies and procedures. And so we have more time to analyze what the cause and effect would be of that.
Yes, but all the calculations we've done that you've seen are all based on that 30%. It's a kind of norm or a standard that's applied.
And I think that that's something it would be good for the council to consider alongside your consideration about annual certification, whether to require that or not require that, because enforcement of that 30% might be an issue that you'll want to think about.
Right.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and really rein this in and try to get more council members, because this is the first time I've only talked to one other council member about this, and I really want to hear from everybody, but I definitely want to get questions vetted. So if I can just move this. So are there any other questions that you had for City Attorney? Okay, so keep going. Let's go.
Well, so I have a few clarifying questions. So I think we need to decide on the ballot language, the question that appears above the fold, if you will, right? And that's what everybody reads. Well, I hope we'll read. But there's also arguments in favor of, right? So we can get into a little bit more of the weeds if someone so chooses to go below the fold and read a little bit more details, right? So there's some room for us to give additional details, like maybe explaining some of these nuances that we don't want to put above the fold, right? Yeah, so there's room for that. Okay. So that would address questions of the income audit, encouraging balance. So if I guess maybe it's a question for Mr. Keiser partly as well. If we were to have some sort of like language in the amendment to say we are, preference will be given to projects that demonstrate a range, an average, a range. Would you consider that too cumbersome, or would that be reasonable? Is that something we can aspire to?
I think that that you can state in the ballot language it's your intention to achieve that balance. But I would like to defer the how to the policies and procedures.
Okay.
So I think it's fine to say that you will use all sorts of techniques. Sure. I'm convinced that a combination of the variation in unit size, a whole variety of things, you're going to be able to dial in on hitting that average without making it,
legalistic.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I get you. So we've been talking about the 50 unit per year average over a 3-year period. We've heard some folks making comments about. I think there's in the minds of voters. I think there also would be concerns about big projects, right? What do you think about having a project cap of whatever? Let's say we know that we can do 65. Let's say even 75. So in other words, we can have that over 150 over a 3-year period, have 150. But here's one project that's 75. Then you get the idea. Well, I'm curious to hear what your thoughts are about that.
I don't support a project cap. I think that the 50 units per year, 150 per 3-year period, in the spirit of the original GMO, is where I'd like to leave it.
Yeah, I'm not interested in the project cap particularly. I think that that's the discretion of our planning department, our planning commission, and our city council to decide if a project is in scale for its particular site.
Right. Okay. I gotcha.
I would just say, because I have to always talk last in terms of structure, I don't have any problem with that. My biggest problem is getting the right builders and attracting people that actually do fulfill the vision of our HAP, which is supposed to be where we are. That HAP, I mean, it's so well written, and it's such an it's just such a attract like-minded partners instead of waiting for new developments to show up. The Housing Action Plan provides a clear statement of what our community wants to see, and it's all up to our city manager to make sure, along with a planning director and some other visionary people that are on staff being paid, that can help us get whatever. And so I don't want to impose numbers on people if they're meeting what our vision is. So I have no problem being flexible if it's the right project.
Right.
And that's subjective, but I mean, that's all I can say to that answer.
Okay. And then my other question to you all is, there's going to be some back and forth and ballot language proposals. What do you think about forming a subcommittee of two to help staff come up with a wording that might be, powerful yet, legally sound?
I think that individually we can submit our suggestions to the attorney. I don't think a subcommittee is necessarily appropriate.
I have no problem getting more people involved with staff so that they get our input. And if you want to do it electronically, it isn't always the best effective system that I've noticed in our city, but that's just my opinion. I don't know about a subcommittee, though.
The challenge we have is, any comments we get, this is going to be obviously a very interested topic. No, in the community. So my assumption is the community is going to want to know all of the discussions that you're having, all of the suggestions you're providing the city manager and the city manager or city attorney, and they will have access to all those, which is appropriate. So my question to council would be, how effective or efficient would that be? Because what would that mechanism be for me or the city attorney to come back and say, we like Councilmember Gold's comment, but we're not sure about Councilmember Hagley's comment. All that conversation has to happen in this room. It can't happen via email between us. So I would caution council to that. I think if we could get some direction tonight, we can come back with that. We can do some minor wordsmithing if possible on the 18th. But again, we are under a tight timeline as we mentioned before.
Vice Mayor Hagley, are you ready?
Well, just
go ahead.
to finish my thoughts. I fully agree that this is not the end. This is not it, right? This is just the first step. There's lots of work that we need to be doing, not just for multifamily rentals, but for multifamily owners, all kinds of affordability by design, transportation infrastructure that will support that kind of thing. There's all kinds of work that can be done toward encouraging the development of housing that is consistent with the community's values and our own infrastructure. There's lots of work to be done, and I think there's plenty of room for doing great things, okay, with some creativity and hard work, right? So this is just step one. At least from my perspective, and looking at the goals, that's not what we've agreed to, right? This is not just a checkbox and then we're walking away, right? Are we agreed on that? I want to reinforce that. As far as the specifics, you were asking about chiming in. If we were to talk about some sort of a project cap, I would be interested in doing a rollover. But since there's no interest, then I'm okay with sticking with that. With use it or lose it. Within those 3 years. And there's some urgency that does encourage some urgency. I think. I mean, both in good and bad ways. But I'm okay with that. And I would like to see the verbiage of encouraging the balance. And then to Mr. Keyser's point. We can work on that, how to actually achieve that through policies and procedures. I think, sending the message is through just this amendment and the goals that we want of balance. I think will be, I think a good compromise. Anything else you need to chime in?
Councilmember Neokis, I just had a quick question I didn't catch it from you. Were you in favor or not in favor of having a cap of 50 per year and 150?
Yeah.
Or is it 180 and 60?
I'm okay with the 150, 150 over a 3-year period, and with an average of 50 per year. I think that's a fair compromise.
Are you finished? Are you good? Okay, thank you. Okay, Vice Hagley.
So I was jotting down some notes here. First, I do want to say that there's great points from everybody from all sides. Across the board, there's things that I agree with, or I say, oh well, I get what you're saying, but maybe I don't necessarily agree with that. What we're doing here is I think we need to be careful about saying that we're creating housing, because ultimately none of us up here are. What we're doing, and this reminds me back in 2009 when I was in Las Vegas at the Western Conference, Western States Commercial Real Estate Finance Conference, and back then the commercial real estate lenders weren't lending at all. And somebody said, hey, when are you going to start lending? And one of the lenders said, right now the government keeps changing the rules. It's like being invited to go play poker at somebody's house. They say, all right, put your money on the table, and then we're going to change the rules anytime I want. He said, no, you figure out what the rules are, and then I'll put my money on the table, and then we're ready to play. So they basically were sitting on the sidelines until all the regulations kind of got formed, so they knew what the rules were, what the lending parameters were, and then they could proceed. So I think we have kind of the similar situation here. So I look at, what's being proposed. Well, I don't feel it's ideal. I think, as Mr. Everett said, we got to try. If we don't do anything, then we're just doing nothing. And I don't think we have 2 years. And just because, like you said, this is not a checkbox, all right, let's all go grab beers and we're done. This is one step. I think we're looking at some really good things that we're doing here to modify the original growth management ordinance to do some tweaks based on something that was drafted nearly 20 years ago. And so I think we need to be respectful of the original intent of the GMO, and we're looking for some minor tweaks to adjust to where we are today, and I think that's important. So for me, I agree with Councilmember Gold, the 160%. I don't think we need a floor on that. I like the idea of being able to float within that. The example I got from somebody was, if, say, there's a bartender at one of the restaurants and his girlfriend or fiance or whoever is working, going to school at the JC to become a nurse, and then she graduates and gets a job at the hospital, then now we have to kick him out. We don't want to do that. We want to encourage people to grow. And, the other thing is we want to have options for if somebody is in one of our 120% or under units and they get a raise or they get married or, partner up with somebody, then now they've got to move. Maybe we're creating, not we, but we are providing an opportunity that potentially there is a unit that they could move up into. And I think ultimately that's what we want for a healthy town, is they can move up. Now it opens up another unit in that 120 and under range. And I think that's what we want to kind of encourage. Let's see, I'm fine with the 50, the rollover. I think we stay with the original intent of the GMO. I would love for all of these to just keep piling up, but I think there is a concern from the community about what is the end game. We're not trying to blow up the town with just constant development. I think this kind of helps maintain that. And I think as we go forward, we do want to look at, things tied to the bigger plan of what is our ultimate mix of what we want to deed restricted to market, to multifamily, to everything. And those are ongoing conversations. And the last thing that, let's see. The last point I want to make, this goes back, Measure R has been brought up a couple of times. And, at the end of the day, I look at this as, everybody in this room, we're all on the same team. We're just playing different positions. But our goal is to work together to try to figure out something to do some good. And this is one step. This is not the end. There'll be more. And I appreciate the lively discussion, but I hope that, whatever it is we finally settle on, that the conversation between now and Election Day is a positive conversation, and we're, having lively disagreements about specific things where we may disagree, but it doesn't get to the level of where it was with Measure R. So those are my thoughts.
Thank you. So just a couple things, having served on the Housing Committee and going through a lot in terms of trying to make sense out of really smart people getting together and deciding to create a framing document, which is our HAP. And so, I want to get specific and I want everything to get narrow, but I really think there is no one answer and there's lots of different ways to phrase that. It's intertwingled. So when we look at what we're actually wanting to do tonight is we want to build consensus on this dais. We don't want to just get 3 votes. We don't want just 4 votes. I think we want everybody here that is involved in the city governance, including me, to be satisfied and to understand that what we're doing is not about power at all. It's about, like you said, doing good. And I think it's really unfortunate that there's people that characterize the individuals that do speak against having caps at 160%, somehow, I don't know, I just feel like there's a misunderstanding about our populace. Okay, so let me just tell you who I hear from. I hear from people that really do want to support Measure S and really do want affordable housing to be a value in this city. They don't have a problem addressing workforce housing. And I guess that's the semantics of the game, is what is a worker and what is the force that we need economically for this city to run. We need a place for people to go, to live, and rentals are about, as you already know, people that don't choose to buy. So then when you talk about that, and I know Mark Decker gave us some thoughts on that question of what is this really that we're trying to achieve in terms of the person? What is our objective? What do we value? I value worker housing. I value people being able to come to our town, or they already are here and they're going to be part of something. That's why the Marie Sparks Award was so great to start with tonight. When we talk about community housing, and later in our meeting, we're going to talk about our community, our council goals, and we're going to get to some of this. And one of the goals that we had was the council's going to work with the Community Housing Committee to determine what type of language would be appropriate to amend the GMO. Okay, we're not doing that because we jumped that. Okay, we never worked with the Community Housing Committee to determine that because we're in a bit of a hurry. Assuming consensus, which I really hope tonight we can build consensus, because it does take time. Democracy takes time. Unfortunately, we have to listen to each other, or I would argue, fortunately, we listen to one another and we try to get our best thinkers to help us get what we want for the good. So all these goals that we agreed to, and then we jumped on this one, and I'm not saying it's a bad idea. I was Hallelujah's sister. Because I wanted my staff to go back and give me some information. And I'm not satisfied tonight. I'm not feeling sated right now with what I've digested in terms of understanding, is this really going to get us anywhere? And I'm all into trying things, and I certainly like experiments. Public education is one of them. But I don't really understand why we're thinking we're going to get so much from this. Really, I mean, it seems to me it's too narrow. So I'm not really convinced still that it's going to achieve it. I've spoke with many people. I talked to Hugh Futrell. I talked to Larry Florin. I've heard about David Hill with the Replay Project. Will that change his vision for that huge piece of land on the corner of our expensive roundabout? Even if it goes up to 160, is he going to change his plan on that corner? Is he going to want to do rentals at up to 160? Can we see that big piece of land that's next to trains, that's next to all these important structural aspects to even get money that would be, in fact, from maybe the feds or maybe the state for housing? How can we expect people to change their mind if they don't get more incentives? So would they change their mind? Would Bob Comstock change his mind and change his vision? And can we get our planning director, who's not in the room, unfortunately, but it'd be nice to know, and maybe city manager can write this down, if they actually feel more empowered to make a negotiation with the developer with this language, because we have to vet this. We have a special responsibility in the town of Healdsburg to house our workers. We have to. It's not even a question of like families only. It's a lot of different demographics. And so I'm not feeling satisfied that this is going to do it. And I want to be part of the group, and it never feels worse than being the one vote out. And yet it might just have to be that way if we don't come to a consensus. So I think we've got a consensus. I could live with the cap of 50. I definitely could do an average of 140, more palatable, but I'm willing to go to 160. I can sit with this and I can live with it. Will I be enthusiastic? I hope there's other elements like affordable by design, height limitations should be changed. Density, as someone from our community housing committee said, we need to get a density shift. I mean, all these things we need to focus on instead of just living with this past paradigm and then, coming forward and wanting to be bold with this quick decision to do something really narrow about a rental product. So I guess what I know in my heart and what I also know with my mind after being around people that are really smart and trying to explain things to me, I just know that we need to attract like-minded partners. And if you think this is going to be vetted, or if you think this can work, I spoke with you today, Walter, about this, Mr. Keyser. I don't feel compelled in your summary. I read that to you today on the phone. Your summary, your last paragraph, the way you characterize the viability of this, I just don't feel like it's going to get us what we want. So I think we have a journey here, which is so metaphorically cliche, but it's not going to get us there. There's going to have to be some changes in zoning. There's going to have to be a lot more. So we can get in the weeds, and you did a little bit earlier, some of you. But so yeah, if you want me to just quick stamp, yes, I'll go 50 cap. I'll go up to 160 on the ballot measure. I will support deed restrictions, and I will support the way the attorney has written most of this. But I just don't want us to lose the message that I'm not in consensus with y'all as far as where we're leaving this. If we just say we do something, it's really just the beginning of doing something. I would say this is more of a symbolic act, and I don't mean to doom the idea. I just don't think it's going to get us what we really want. I think we need to get into for sale units. We need to create affordable housing for sale units and get more middle income, because I'm not going to rent in this town. If I came to this town and as a family, I would not come to this town and live as a rental. I mean, I would rather buy something. If I have 140% AMI, I'm not gonna live in Healdsburg. I mean, that's just how I feel, and I've talked to people like that. That's why some people leave. So the rental market in combination with the workers, and we just have a lot more work to do in this town. So if you want to see this as a symbolic step, I'm into symbols, but as far as like feeling really good about this, I came in thinking I was going to vote no. I could probably vote yes on this language if we did change the 50, go to the 140, and really make a commitment as a council that we're not doing this just to do something, but we're actually doing this because we want to create low-income housing as well as middle-income housing so that we aren't short-sighted, because people with money will win. They win because they have the resources. The reason we're doing this is because we're public good, elected by people to do the right thing. And I think Healdsburg wants to do the right thing. I don't think there's people in our town that are greedy and they don't want to help. They own second homes because they rent them out. They don't all remain vacant. There's people that are really good people that have a lot of money in this town. So I'm not villainizing wealth. It's just people come in here, they have a lot more options than are people that we need. And what we need right now, and that's the word I'm going to end with, want and need. What we need is a commitment from this council tonight to not just see this as, okay, this is it, we did something, but really I need more from the council to say we're going to also work on city property being used for housing. Literally city property. Like that's the ticket. So that's.
I think we can all reassure you that no one on this dais thinks that this is going to solve our housing affordability issues.
Well, I know that.
Everybody,
I
everybody
listened to you guys. I just wanted to.
Everybody is committed.
Okay. I just feel like I have to say this before I vote your way.
Low income housing. We're all committed to that. This is something different. It's a separate issue, which is just correcting a unintended consequence of the GMO that prevented the multifamily from being built. It's okay. So we're not turning our back on the truly
I understand,
needy.
but I have a right, as you do too, to focus on what you want to focus on. And this is my time to talk to all 5 members or all 4 members of you. And I do feel compelled to say that I'm not satisfied with this. So if you want my vote, I'm just saying, if you want me to be in this, I just want to make sure it's clear that this is not addressing.
But it's just the beginning. I think we all feel that way.
Okay, I just want to hear that. So thank you for saying that, because that satisfies me a little bit.
I pick it up on what you're saying, and I have to say again, amen, sister.
It feels a little patronizing, but okay, so I will just go hallelujah.
I just want to ask clarity.
Yeah.
Mayor, you mentioned 140 and you also mentioned 160. And you mentioned up to 140 and you also mentioned up to 160. I just want to be clear that consensus. Okay.
I'm not scolding anybody as much as I'm just my heartful self. That's who I am, and I'm frustrated because I want more than what we're doing, and I have a right to have that experience, so I will have that experience. I went through a lot. This is my 4th year, and I really don't want to miss the meaning here that we didn't go through a protocol that I felt would have vetted this better, and I want to do a better job next time. So we need to deal with our community better. We need to do what we say we're going to do, which is meet with our community housing committee and determine what type of language we want and actually vet it in a more appropriate way. So I would argue for that. And that's what I need. So I'm only going with what y'all said you wanted to do, which is create a system where more people feel included and we don't have divisiveness. Because that's what I don't like, is when people go, they're against growth, they don't want anything to be built. That's not the reality. It's more about the kind of housing we're gonna get. So yeah, this is definitely a step, but it's a small step in the scope of what Healdsburg needs to do. So I can support it, and I am saying 140, even though I know that everybody else said 160, right? Okay, just keeping track. Okay, so at this point, City Manager, what do you want us to do?
So what I'd like to do, if you would allow us to actually jump up here real quick, and the city attorney will put up the language which we think addresses, well, no, we haven't. We're going to do that here in about 2 seconds. We're going to just work off of this because it's really important that we have consensus, or we're close to consensus at the very least with regards to the ballot language.
5-minute break.
We have some technical issues we're
Okay,
going to need to
because
address.
we've been in there for a little while.
Great.
And
5 minutes.
yeah, and I'm feeling a lot. So, City Attorney, you have some new language you'd like to put up
Yes.
for us to look at as a council?
Through the magic of technology. Whoa. Sorry. We've updated the language on the PowerPoint to reflect what I think you discussed tonight. And really the only substantive change is changing 60 to 50. I corrected a typo that's been driving me crazy. And then I added in this, the permitting of, and that language is actually consistent with the original GMO in 2000. And that's it. Yes.
I would think that you'd want to put capped at up to 160%. This says capped at 160%, implying that they're all capped that way.
Okay. Thoughts?
Doesn't cap imply up to? Capped at no greater than?
Well, then you could remove capped if you said with rents no greater than 160.
Or not to exceed 160.
Not to exceed.
Yeah.
That's a good one. That's good. I think it's more clear than capped.
Yeah.
Anything
Your
else?
comments on the ballot language as it is?
Well, I guess technically, the rents themselves are, if you want to be grammatically correct, right? I mean, the rents themselves are not exceeding 160%. It's the rents are affordable to those households that earn.
Oh, that's true. With rents.
Not to exceed affordability for residents earning 160%? Is that too clunky?
Exceed. I think it's a little, let's see, with
It's a little
rents.
clunky.
Not to exceed. Affordable.
Harder than a group of people trying to write something together, but we can try it.
Affordable by
Designed by
160.
committee.
That doesn't
Yeah.
make sense. Affordable to households. It's getting longer.
You get 100 words.
How about under 160%?
Does that capture 160?
Right.
What makes it
160 is
159.9%? So earning under 160%, why not?
I thought the cap was 160. So that's it, right?
Back to not to exceed.
It's the same as
No more than, so that thing.
Well, let's
That
see.
captures the 160.
Affordable to households.
What do you think, Walter
Earning,
Keyser? What do you
households
think?
earning up to 160%. That works. Did you hear that, Sean? Sean got it.
Okay,
Earning
say
up
it.
to,
Earning.
with rents affordable to households earning up to 160% of the Sonoma area.
Is that clear enough? Up to? Or should we have something about not exceeding?
So we're going to ask in a minute, whenever you're prepared, to make a motion directing staff to prepare the ballot language to reflect this. I will say this, on the meeting on the 18th, this will be available again for you if you so wish.
Okay.
I'm okay with letting this go forward, and people can read it. They'll chime in. I'm absolutely open to suggestions.
I mean, I think the essence of what is here, the 50 and the 160, and then obviously down in the supporting things on the page would be things like 150 in 3 years, et cetera, et cetera.
And so city manager, just process step, I'm just trying to figure something out. So we're going to go ahead and say, yay, this is the language. And then on the 18th, we come back. And then what is in between now and the 18th in terms of the process?
So nothing from council's perspective, with regards to this, what staff has to do is go back, take a look at the actual ordinance itself. There's some things we discussed, like defining what a multifamily rental unit is. That's not defined. And so we'll be, when I say we, I'm really talking about our city attorney. We'll be looking at that. And then when we come back on the 18th, you'll have whatever this language is, which we agree upon tonight, but we'll also have a draft ordinance as far as what the actual voters will be voting on. This just kind of gives them a description of what is actually in the ordinance. We need to bring forward to council is really the meat and potatoes of what is actually in the ordinance. And so that will be coming back to you on the 18th. I think based on the comments we've received tonight, I think we have a pretty good understanding of the larger pieces of it, which are going to be 50 units, an average of 50 units over a 3-year period with the cap of 150. They don't roll over. The nice thing about that is we're starting a new cycle actually in January 1st. So if this were to go to the voters and it were to pass, we would be on the same cycle as the current GMO, which would be much more efficient, frankly. So I think those are the big things we would be looking at.
So if you have patience for just a little more wordsmithing.
Yeah, I'm
that
concerned
phrase
about this.
average, for an additional average of 50, that to me is confusing. I think maybe the averaging part should be in the supporting language, and it should just say permitting 50 multifamily or an additional 50, and not use that word average. That I find that confusing.
Additional up to again?
My concern about that would be this would be the floor of this would be the limit of what the city could do.
Mm-hmm.
So if you don't have average in the ballot language, and then it would be difficult, I think, to include it in the procedures. I'd really suggest you have it here. My concern actually about this language is I might want to tinker with it a bit, this last bit about rents affordable to households earning up to 160 of the Sonoma County area median income. I think what you mean by that is rents that are at that 160, at or below that 160 on that chart that shows here's what in households of X amount making 160 can afford. But I think that the term affordable could be subjective.
Well,
and so this could be interpreted to mean
affordable housing
or whatever X person or Y person or Z person considers affordable. So I think if I could make a suggestion, I think I understand what you're trying to say. I'm not sure that we're going to come up with the verbiage right now.
Okay.
Maybe we could look at it and suggest something to you on
That'd be fine. I just want to get as close as we possibly can tonight because a lot of this will be dealing with the policy in the ordinance.
I think I understand that concern. My greater concern is the details that staff, city attorney, what notes did we write down tonight about the other aspects of this? Like, in other words, that's where I think it's going to be really critical that we get zoned in on or zoomed in on or whatever, because that's what's really going to make a developer want to jump in.
Yeah.
Don't you think? I mean, if we don't get clear, so did anyone take any notes about like what some of the values were, like affordable by design, changing zoning limits?
Yes.
Zoning.
I can speak for me.
Heights
I saw
and
city
densities.
manager take notes.
So people were taking
But
notes.
more importantly, that will come back to you.
Okay, but I'd rather you guys know what our values are since we had a pretty rich discussion up here.
Yeah.
We heard from thoughtful people and we have a HAP and.
I certainly think we do. And again, it'll come back to you when we're talking about the policies and procedures. Those will come back to you. Any suggested changes to the zoning code to be consistent with this will come back to you.
And then again, just city manager, you're the one, I mean, you really are the one who's going to be negotiating with this. It's certainly not going to be any of us. So I think that that's the biggest thing is if you could just consistently give us a lens of how you're seeing this looking, I would appreciate
Well, I
knowing
think
that,
right
too.
now, just to put it very simply, we don't have the ability, and I'll use replay as an example, we don't have the ability to negotiate anything with them because we don't have the ability to look at allocations with regards to rental units and things like that. There's nothing that guarantees that company will build them, but we don't have those cards to play.
And I think Replay or anybody out there doesn't really have the ability to do the things they may want to do because our city has certain procedural aspects and certain zones and, like different things that create obstacles for them as well. So that's where you meet in the middle. And like you said, they're building the product, unless we donate the land, which is what I would love to do. But in the meanwhile, I hear you. So we're going to wait for city attorney to come back with some language. Because I know you got
Yes,
and
I
maybe
will certainly be in contact.
Councilwoman Gold can work with you or something.
The manager about that. I think I feel like I understand where you're going. I'm just not sure that we're going to be able to wordsmith this tonight.
Thank you for attempting to do it in the moment. But I think the values are clear up here, right?
Yes.
You have some consensus with the numbers.
Mayor, I have some clarification question. With regard to the actual supporting arguments, what do we have deadlines for those?
Yes, but we have time for that. So we'll be coming back on the 18th. We'll be talking about letters, I think, support of the document, support of the ballot measure. We need to obviously get to the language first, but we'll talk about who writes that. If it's one person, if it's the council. We had the same conversation back in 2016, so we'll be able to address that later.
So at this point, I think that we're going to go ahead and just say we've come to some conclusions about where this council is going with a GMO ballot initiative to amend our GMO for multifamily units, 50 a year average.
Cap of 160, correct.
And we are going to do 160.
Correct. There is consensus for that.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Thank you so much. Thank you. Appreciate all the work. Walter Kieser and City Attorney. Keep looking at these cottage courts and thinking okay. All right. So let's move on to the next item, which may seem actually intertwined or connected, which is city council goals for the fiscal year. So I think we're approving the goals. And I did want to bring something up before we did. And I wanted to ask my fellow council members if they would be down for changing the order of the goals, only out of total just the passion of it all. I don't know. But if you want to look at them, because we always alphabetize everything, and because Marie Sparks' award was earlier, and because we know community is really a great word to start with, my recommendation is we adopt the goals by also looking at the order that we write them on a poster. And I really would like to put community development first, then community housing, then community services. I know they all matter, but like the ADU issue, even though it mattered, it's not as far along maybe for some people. So anyway, I would like to just change it. And then city facilities, could you just put infrastructure first and then city facilities? Because then we can just see community at the top of the list. And it's subjective as heck, but I'm just putting it forward. And if you don't like it, at least I said it. I just feel like I like community first and then move forward with all the others that are just as important, but.
It's fine with me.
Okay, so reordered, is that okay? So I can give that to you later. Okay, all right, so as far as the goals, city manager, did you want us to just say, yay, we agree with all of them?
Madam Mayor, so again, I have a short presentation.
Oh,
but,
you are going to present, okay.
But again, I think you have this in your packet. I won't go through all of them.
Okay.
But I think the question you had actually refers to this slide.
Yes, thank you.
So just so I'm clear, so that there was consensus to have community housing be first, I'm sorry?
I really thought that it would be nice. I put community development, then community housing, then community services, then connectivity, fiscal responsibility, and then infrastructure, or whatever you want to call the city. I know city facilities are important, but we've been focusing on that, so I thought it'd be nice to, infrastructure is always good to focus on. But okay, so that's just what I suggested to start out.
Well, it makes it alphabetical, so that sort of implies that there's no value judgment if it's infrastructure / city facilities.
Politically correct and everything, okay. Yeah,
so are you suggesting we stay alphabetical? I'm sorry, we stay alphabetical, we simply just switch
that's what you
infrastructure and city
initially,
facilities.
Yeah.
So that's what this will reflect.
Is that okay?
Back. Pardon?
Is that okay with the council? Okay, because it's the same difference, right? It's just needing a little community at the top. Okay. Okay, well then, your presentation?
Again, I think we've seen this before. I'm happy to, what I'll do is I'll just go through the titles and I can stop at anyone that council wants to discuss. We have, which will be referred to as infrastructure, city facilities. And these are the goals up top. You can see community development, land use policies, which again, have been talked about at the previous agenda item. We will be bringing forward some the hotel discussion, I believe, at the August 6th meeting. At least that's what we're tentatively scheduled to do. And this also addresses the South Entry Plan. I think council really wanted to take more of a South Entry Plan light approach to kind of get a better understanding of what that looks like before we jump off into that process, and that's what this reflects. Community housing.
Change the language because we're not doing what we said we're doing there. So just probably axe out that the council's working with Community Housing Committee. That bullet needs to go, right? Or that arrow?
So, yes, potentially. I think what council has to understand is these goals really are meant to start July 1st, right? So we're currently in the 17-18 year right now. Our fiscal year ends in end of June. So there was language, I think, in one of the outcomes to work with the CHC to develop ballot language for the potential GMO. Obviously, that action will occur prior to July 1st. So if council wishes to strike that, it's not in, this is the actual goal. I think it's in the actual work plan. We could strike that.
Not going to strike the ADU bit, right?
No.
Okay.
So you're saying we're striking the whole first bullet?
No. Sorry. It's actually in your staff report. If you go to...
It's under projected outcomes.
Yeah, projected
the
outcomes.
First two bullets don't make any sense because July 1st, these things have already been done or not done.
Would you like to? Should we like me to take you to that slide? It's on a different presentation.
Yeah, that'd be. It's 8B, I think. And see the first item.
There we go. Council to work with the Community Housing Committee to determine what type of language would be appropriate to amend the Growth Management Ordinance. That work will not occur because it will be in July, after July 1st. I think you just had it there. We could take that off. It looks like we have council consensus to move forward with the ballot, but again, that would take place in July, so that could come off as well if the council wishes. Which one?
I don't think it's relevant, but that's just my opinion. It just keeps it simpler. It's already happening. We just made the consensus. Do you still want on it? The second item, assuming council consensus, ensure that the Growth Management Ordinance amendment is placed. The Growth Management Ordinance is what we just did, right?
Well, I guess we're well on our way of achieving one of our objectives.
Okay.
Yeah, and actually, council will have to take final action on that in August, so that would be appropriate to be in the next fiscal year.
You could just say develop a growth management ordinance to be placed on the November ballot.
Sure.
Okay.
Sounds good.
So we'll leave that, but we will strike the first one.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Sounds good.
Can we go back to the other one? I have it. Sorry. Work with regional partners to create a strategic plan for the homelessness, implement policies to improve overall community health and limit the effects of secondhand smoke. Community services, embark on community-based arts and culture plan, develop opportunities to enhance river access. I believe Director Theming is already working with MIG to look at the Badger Park plan. Is that proposal? Thank you. Connectivity and transportation. Develop and implement policies that increase non-vehicular modes of transportation, enhance the city's ability to secure grant funding to increase bike and pedestrian access. I'm just going to go through these and adopt some physical strategy that addresses the city's short and long-term pension costs. We're bringing forward a proposal in the early fall and begin planning for the sunset of Measure V. We are working currently on the Measure V report card, I believe is what council asked for. So outreach partners working on that. And I believe that concludes.
Just point of clarification. So once our council goes ahead and approves this, then we get a poster made. I mean, that's pretty much the poster, and then that's what we're
correct. Those will be the goals.
Those will
be the goals which we will then, I mean, the budget is actually predicated on some of those goals already with the assumption that that will be approved, or some of that will be approved. And then what we'll end up doing is creating a work plan to actually implement those things. For instance, as far as the smoking issue goes, that will be a planning, well, I probably come from planning or probably planning, frankly. And so what we'll end up doing is talking to the director to find out what resources, how we shuffle those things around. When it comes to the measure or the pension piece for that matter, what I'll do is I'll work with Director Ipoletti, who was here, and look at how we resource that to move that forward. So it is important because once we establish what the goals are, I'll work with the department heads to establish work plans to fulfill those goals.
Other comments or anything? Okay, moving on then. So,
Public comment.
oh, pardon me. How could I ever forget that? Public comment is a pertinent moment here. So would anyone like to come forward and speak regarding the City Council goal adoption of the fiscal year 2018-2019? Thank you. Welcome. Sorry about that.
Todd Everett, Mr. Mayor and council members. I'm surprised there aren't more people up here to speak. And maybe I'm missing something here about what we're doing, because it means we've pretty much agreed to all of these goals, but I would not feel comfortable in letting this pass by saying that I really think it's critical that you include starting the update to the general plan during this time period. And the reason that is that you're going to get the benefit of the AIA, the American Institute of Architects, coming here in August 13th to the 15th. They're going to produce a reflection, an assessment of what the community aspires to. And it really is going to be critical that we take advantage of that and start thinking strategically about the whole community. And updating the general plan, to me, is the starting place. And I would slow down the South Entry plan until we've done the update to the general plan. And I think that we've heard a lot tonight about the importance of looking at zoning and making some improvements to our zoning. All of those go together. I'm afraid that what happen is we're going to get into the South Entry, we're going to start dealing with some of these macro strategic issues, but we're not going to have the benefit of the general plan. And then we'll go and spend over $1 million with consultants and study it, and we will say, wow, if we'd only known what we knew, we would have approached doing the South Entry plan in a different way. So that's one thought. The other, I think it's really important we address the hotel issue, and I see it's in here, and I hope that we really make some progress on that. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else like to address regarding the city goals? Okay, I'm going to close public comment at 9:03. Any other thoughts about our public comment or anything else, or we
Just a question, when is general plan update currently scheduled for?
I think we were going to look at that next year. That was, we discussed that, and I believe we were looking to begin that process next. This will be a goal for next year. I think it's important to note too, we will be looking at starting our strategic plan, our 5-year strategic plan in January. So a lot of these things will be addressed through that as well.
Okay.
I mean, here's, I give this a B, right? I'm in the A to F, right? There are some things I'm not really happy about that I would like to see, but I'm okay with this as is. And some of the things that I would like to see are more aligned with the conversations of looking into overall general strategy for the city, A, and B, getting having more a stronger focus on performance-based metrics on how we are serving how well we are serving the needs of our community through the city services, right? I think those are important. I think strategically, it's not just a question of land use; it's also a question of revenue, right? And costs, right? Of revenue in terms of tax base? Are we, what are we doing to make sure that 25% of our retail tax base is healthy, meaning auto sales? I mean, there's a lot there. I'm okay with this. This is what we kind of came to on a consensus. I think that, to the city manager's point, we've got some room for addressing those issues when we start talking about the strategic plan update, and I'll be eager to bring that forward at that time. However, if two more of us want to throw some additional language along those lines that I've mentioned, I'd be supportive, but I'm okay with this.
I'm thinking back to the goal session that we had. I think it was back in February and March. Thanks. I thought that it was a very productive, and it was the way that the conversation went and the way that we were able to kind of freely talk about everything was really productive. But at some point, we have to get down to business and kind of take a snapshot and say, okay, this is what we're going to do for the year, and provide a clear and somewhat stable direction to staff so that we can actually get this stuff done. I fear that if we try to kind of change too much in the meantime, it might serve to that we don't achieve as much. And so I totally understand what you're saying. And I remember, Councilmember, because like you and I would be talking over the last, before that March, and I'm like, bring it up at goals, and we did, and we got it all on there, and now we're looking at that stuff. And so we're kind of back into that period of, okay, let's think about next March and what we're gonna do and what we've achieved, and kind of looking back. I know it's frustrating when, in the private sector, it's like, oh, I want to do this. Okay, I'll go do it, But, we have to kind of stay in this model to kind of keep everybody, sane.
Sure, I get it. We came to a consensus on these, and there's a lot that I love, and there's some things that I'm not completely happy with, but it's a compromise, and I'm fine with it. Yeah.
So if there's no more discussion, I would offer.
Well, before you do.
Oh, sorry. You have a comment. Excuse me.
So one thing that I talked to the city manager about, and I don't know, again, I've used this a lot just because it organized me when I came on. I would like to see, city manager, you mentioned you were going to do this. Oh, good. You have it? Yes. This is what I want to leave on. I want to see continuity. I want to see all the way across what we have done the last 4 years, because this drops on 2014. Remember this when you were vice mayor. So 2015, 2016, 2017, that's what I want, is to see what the city council has adopted so we can kind of track what has been looked at. I think it's really valuable. I love this. This is great. Thank you. This is exactly what I wanted to see. Thank you. I think this helps when you go to strategic planning next year, 2019, because you kind of look at what you've been valuing and then you kind of see what's been done, and you can, I just like a history of the council goals. So thank you for updating those. That's exactly what I wanted, and I love it. So it just gives you a perspective. So thanks. All right, so now I'm ready. Councilwoman Gold, for you to.
Yes, I move that we approve the city council goals for fiscal year 2018-19 with the amendments that we have specified this evening.
Second.
Okay. Councilmember Gold?
Yes.
Councilmember McCaffrey?
Yes.
Councilmember Naokis?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Higley?
Yes.
Mayor Mansell?
Yes. Okay, and so now we're going to move on to approving operating budgets and capital improvement programs for the years listed. So again, are you going to give some background? Oh, of course you are. Thank you, Director Apple.
Good evening, Mayor and Council members. Heather Ipoletti, Assistant City Manager. Before you tonight is the proposed adoption of 4 resolutions, 2 resolutions that adopt the operating budget, a resolution that adopts the capital improvement program for fiscal years 18 to 23, and a resolution reestablishing the list of authorized positions. A little review of the budget process that we've gone through over the last 5.5 months or so. January, we started with the Measure V survey questions. We posted and mailed the survey in February. We revealed the results in March, also started that goal-setting process. In April, we did some community input and did a little budget 101. In May, we held 2 study sessions in the 14th and the 17th, which I'll detail in the next couple of slides. And then all along, our whole goal was tonight to adopt a budget. On May 14th, the beginning of the proposed budget was revealed. I started with the changes affecting all budgets. Because they are important, I'm going to do a very quick review of those. The increased personnel costs. The MOU had some automatic increases at July 1 of each year based on the CPI. It's a 3.6% for the first year, assume 3.5 in the second year. Increased information service fees. We've, over the last couple of years and going forward, we have an increased reliance on technology. Increased insurance, general liability, and workers' comp. I talked about how REMIF has unfunded liabilities, and we need to pay those off in the next 5 years or so. Also, the increased pension unfunded liability payments. John Bartel has talked to us a couple times over the last couple of years. Well, it's now coming to a reality. And then the increased pension obligation debt payments. I also talked about the general fund, the revenue and expenses by department, as well as the operation and capital budget for community services, as well as brought back the Measure V fund and reminded council about how they had talked about that allocation way back earlier in the year. On May 17th, we went into the utility funds, the operations and capital of the water, wastewater, drainage, and electric funds, and then touched on the other funds, the airport, the operations and capital, as well as the streets fund, operations and capital. And then we revisited a couple of the projects in the capital services, in the community services, primarily the Badger Park project. And we talked about the vehicle purchases, as well as the allocation of the Affordable Housing Measure S Fund. And then there was what I did since the presentations on the 14th and the 17th, I've made a couple changes, mostly related to the Affordable Housing Fund. I reduced some of the expenses in the Affordable Housing Fund, primarily reduced the transfers out to debt, and the general fund will be absorbing that. And so that's increased expenses. And then in between the 14th and the 17th, I had already adjusted the Measure S fund and applied more of the administration allocation to the general fund. So essentially, we can expect a June 30th, 2020 unrestricted, unreserved fund balance of $439,541. Again, that's the exceeding the 30% operating reserve. The estimated fund balance at June 30th, 2020 in the Measure S fund is $1,369,948. And then another small change that was made to the Community Services Fund since the last presentation was a change in policy related to the per participant fee for sports associations, which reduces the revenue annually by $6,500. And that leaves the Community Services Fund with an unrestricted, unreserved fund balance of $869,245 at June 30th, 2020. Again, that's the reserve exceeding the 30% operating reserve. All funds are meeting and exceeding the council adopted reserve policy. And again, tonight, 4 resolutions. The first, adopt a resolution of the City Council of the City of Healdsburg adopting the budget for fiscal year 18-19. A second resolution, adopting the budget for fiscal year 19-20. Third resolution, adopting the capital improvement program for fiscal years 18-23. And the fourth resolution, reestablishing the list of authorized positions. And that ends staff's presentation.
Okay, any questions from anyone on the dais regarding any of this? Okay, Councilman Neokas.
Thank you. So, You know, I watched wistfully on the recordings because I wasn't here. I had work called. I have some questions about about some of the metrics, about your overall metrics. I think I like the fact that obviously you're focusing on numbers, you're focusing on balances and reserves, and those are very important metrics. There are a couple of dimensions of that I would be interested in hearing your feedback on. Yours over city managers. First of all, is might there be a more rigorous way of quantifying the performance of those funds? I guess in particular, let's talk about the asks for staff increases, right? So I'm supportive of it. I trust your judgment. Your staff's judgment is saying by investing in these resources, we're going to get benefits in terms of potential revenues or increases, additional people served, decreased, all kinds of ways that we can measure the impact of those asks, right? I would like to actually see what coming in the future, coming back when you do report on the your budgetary regular budgetary reports, how we're doing. You asked for those. You made those asks. How well are you performing against what you essentially promised to deliver with those asks?
So, if I may, we've talked about performance-based budgeting here for a while, and I think we're at the point now, especially with Director Iappolitti being able to focus more on the finance world, if you will, not having to wear too many hats. I think we'll be able to come back with some things that we can address through that. One of the things we talked about is performance-based for our community services. It's something Director Thimig may be able to do surveys for all of the participants, and he'll be able to measure what their satisfaction is, and that we can bring that back to the council and say, all of the participants are at 85% or 90, whatever that percentage is. We've done things like that in other cities, so I think we can bring things like that. With planning and building, we can take a look at what the turnaround time is for permits. We can take a look at how many permits we're processing on an annual basis. I think that the permit software will, once we're finally online with that, and I should say not finally online, but once we're fully trained up on that, we're able to utilize it better. I think that those will be helpful tools, and we can take examples of that for all the different departments. But that takes time to develop those. I don't want to just say what those things could be, but I think with Director Iappolitti now, maybe not reducing the number of hats, just changing the number of hats, we'll be able to work with the department heads to come up with more of those pieces.
I have a feeling that if we can unleash your inner numbers nerd more so than you're unleashing it with us here, that I think we could see some very interesting statistics that would be really enlightening both for us and for the taxpayers, right? I mean, does that make sense?
I appreciate reflection, and I appreciate reflection on money after it's been spent. So whatever we can do, and I agree. I mean, there's only so much you can do, but I really appreciate your view of things, and you definitely do a good job of holding a tight budget. Appreciate the changes you made, and you knew my thing with Measure S, so thank you. But I do agree, reflection's important, and I think it helps. I don't know what else everybody else does. It's very late, but it's also not that late. I'm starting to wake up now. About 9:15 is when I start coming alive, so get ready. No, so just, yes,
and
I support you.
Thank you. I apologize because I wasn't here for those two, so this is my chance. The next question. I think it's something that at least two of you brought up, and this is the way that wages and benefits are portrayed as a liability, when in fact really the truth of the matter is that so much of what this organization is all about is the people, and to look at those numbers and say, oh my God, look at all the money we're spending. Well, no, that's actually money we're investing in staff and training and building these people to serve the community, right? And it just kills me. I know that there's from a gap, an accounting perspective, how do you quantify those intangible assets? I get it. But at the same time, I just think that there's something that we can do. Maybe it might not satisfy gap principles, but there's, again, in the spirit of can we get some sort of a here's a perfect example. I was talking to one of the staff members at the wastewater plant, and we're talking about the fact that the wastewater plant is running on 6 employees when the designer of the plant thought that we need 12. So that's a pretty interesting number. That half of because of intelligent investment and training and the right and retaining and retention of the right people, we're doubling. We're 100% more effective than the designer of that facility. That's a really compelling story. Where is that? So that's the kind of thing that just like kills me. And if there's any way that you can, again, when you guys come back with some reporting, I would love to see something like that. And then finally, I had all kinds of questions, but they were all answered satisfactorily in the meantime. But the one thing that I wanted to talk briefly about was the rejiggering of the 3 North Fund, which I support, by the way. I think that's a smart and responsible way handling of those funds. We got to do it. There's a significant risk of negative impacts if we don't spend that money. I get it. But I'm also concerned about the fact that we're just kicking this can and wait. What are we going to do with this? I feel like, and maybe this is a question for next year to think about for goals, but I almost want to think, I almost want to go to the community and say, okay, community, it's going to take $6 million, probably, at least. You come up with we'll put in, I don't know, $1 for every 50 cents of community input or something, where some way that we say, we'll be in it, we'll put some skin in the game, but you have to put some skin in the game too. And if after a period of a couple of years, there's no consensus from the community, there is not that sense of participation, then I think we need to kind of reevaluate that plan and maybe think of a plan B. Because I think that just leaving that property there, it's a way significantly underutilized asset in a town where land is priceless almost. So that makes me uncomfortable kicking the can down the road too far. And I'll be open to hearing interesting ideas. But I don't know what else to say about that at this point.
I have ideas. I'll talk to you one-on-one about it.
All right.
Yeah.
Good.
I think housing is the ticket right now for me.
Okay. And then that is it.
Okay, thank you. And I understand when you're not here, it's like you want to come back, and I know what it feels like to wait, so I gotcha. All right, anybody else want to say anything before we go to I think we're going to be doing, we have to open it to public. Sorry, I'm so sorry. Thank you, public, for being patient. Look at you all. You've happy faces. Who would like to say something first? Because you're welcome to come up to the podium. Please, this is a good time for you to come now. We've opened it up for you. Anybody? No? Okay. Sorry it's going so late, everybody. Okay, so at this point, no one's coming up, so we will close public comment.
All right, if there's no comments, I'd be happy to, I'm assuming we have to do all these separate. So
let's vary the voices.
All right, I'll do the first one. I'd like to we adopt a resolution of the City Council of the City of Healdsburg adopting the budget for fiscal year 2018 to 19.
Second.
Councilmember Gold?
Yes.
Councilmember McCaffrey?
Yes.
Councilmember Nayokis?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Higley?
Yes.
Mayor Mansell?
Yes. Okay, and the next is, do we just keep going?
I move that we adopt a resolution of the City Council of the City budget adopting the 2019-20 budget.
Second.
Councilmember Gold?
Yes.
Councilmember McCaffrey?
Yes.
Councilmember Nayokis?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Higley?
Yes.
Mayor Mansell?
May I please begin with I would like to adopt a resolution of the City Council of the City of Healdsburg adopting the capital improvement program for fiscal years 2018 to 2023.
Second.
Councilmember Gold?
Yes.
Councilmember McCaffrey?
Yes.
Councilmember Nayokis?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Higley?
Yes.
Mayor Mansell?
Yes.
Go, Sean.
I'll offer a resolution of the City Council of the City of Healdsburg rescinding resolution number 12-2018 and reestablishing the list of authorized positions.
Second.
Councilmember Gold?
Yes.
Councilmember McCaffrey?
Yes.
Councilmember Nayokis?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Higley?
Yes.
Mayor Mansell?
So this is moving on to The CalPERS contract amendment, which is to adopt upon second reading by title only and waiving reading of the text, ordinance number 1175, authorizing an amendment to the contract between the City Council and the Board of Administration of the California Public Employees Retirement System.
Good evening. A little bit of background. The city reached agreement with the Mid-Management and Professional Employees Association and the Healdsburg Police Officers Association, the International Association with Firefighters, for the period covering July 1/17 through June 30th, 2020. As part of the agreements, the classic public safety members under Public Employees Retirement Pension Reform Act of 13, within the meaning of PEPRA, agreed to share in the employer contribution to CalPERS. The groups agreed to contribute an additional 1% towards the employer contribution each year for the 3 years of the contract. The city's employer share for fiscal year 18-19 is 19.556% for classic public safety employees. As of the effective date of the amendment to the contract, the classic safety employees will increase their employee contribution by 1% to 11%, thereby reducing the employer portion from 19.556% to 18.556%. The contract amendment will cover 13 current employees. The contract amendment process, as dictated by CalPERS and the Government Code. On May 7th, we adopted a resolution of intent. We also introduced and held the first reading of the ordinance. Then on the 8th, we held a ballot election by the employees affected by the amendment contract. That was a successful ballot. Today, we're holding the second reading and adopting the ordinance. The amendment, if approved tonight, will take effect on with the payroll starting on July 8th. Again, tonight, we're adopting upon second reading by title only and waiving reading of the text, ordinance number 1175, authorizing an amendment to the contract between the City Council of the City of Healdsburg and the Board of Administration of the California Public Employees Retirement System. That concludes staff's report.
So we just move forward and open it to the public again because they would like to have some input. So would anyone from the public like to ask any questions or make any commentary based on what you just heard? Okay, there's nobody coming up, so we're going to close public comment and we'll come back to the dais.
I move that we adopt upon second reading by title only and waiving reading of the text, ordinance number 1175, authorizing an amendment to the contract between the City Council of the City of Healdsburg and the Board of Administration of the California Public Employees Retirement System.
Second.
Councilmember Gold?
Yes.
Councilmember McCaffrey?
Yes.
Councilmember Naokis?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Higley?
Yes.
Mayor Mansell?
Okay, we have no new business, and this is, now we're at 9:27, and we're inviting council reports on matters of interest occurring since previous regular meetings, expense reimbursement reports, anything you want to share that's happened in the last couple of weeks. So does anybody want to start? Yes, please.
I had the pleasure to meet with Robert Bamford, the Executive Director of the North Sonoma County Air Quality Control District.
Nice.
And it was very informative, and I was envious of their space with that cool conference room that might, I don't know, it's a really cool conference room. But anyway, I learned a lot about air quality, and I'm digging a little deeper on a kind of a bee in my bonnet, and I'll report back again next time.
Nothing. I was at the same meeting, but I'd been in the office before. I knew what it looked like.
So the only thing I'd like to report on is my attendance at the Senior Citizens Advisory Committee, where they, if you'll notice in the next agenda item, they are recommending that we adopt, what's the exact wording? I'm just pulling it up. That motion to recommend to City Council that Healdsburg be designated as an age-friendly city by the World WHO. I thought Director Themig would be here to talk about it, but if that means do we need to take, are they asking us to take action to?
Yeah, that'll be on the 18th.
Oh, it's coming up on the 18th. Yeah. Okay, great. So yeah, that's what I have to report.
I'll be real quick. I attended the FFA dinner and auction. First time I'd gone to that auction. And part of the reason I went is former planning commissioner Joe Lickey. His daughter had 2 pigs, and we got to go see her, working on the pigs and all that stuff. Like for months, and seeing these kids get out there and sell them, that story was great. But the other half was seeing the local community members, Big John's, Bear Republic, sitting there just bidding up on some of these pigs where maybe there wasn't a winery that was bidding it up, and they would start bidding to help the kids. And so it was a great down home Healdsburg, real warm and fuzzy thing to go see, aside from what happens to the animals afterwards. But and then on the Tuesday the 29th, we had an NCRA property committee meeting. And then I had the honor of throwing out the first pitch in the dirt, which was extremely embarrassing after all the practice pitches that were flawless. And then that's right. I came back the next day and watched our mayor throw out the first pitch, and she did a lot better job than I did. Yeah. So that's it for my report.
It is unfortunate that we put these last because it's the way we stay human with each other about our community, but here we are. So I'll be fast. I met with Tom Brand and Richard Norgrove regarding the Raven and theater and the performing arts and what we as a community can do. And so here we are having adopted some city goals, but they are probably going to be wanting to check in with y'all, and I'm sure they're going to connect with the city manager because they're really looking at the Raven Theater as a public space. And as you well know, it needs some work, and they're looking at different ways to make it better. But it's been a place for our community to gather. I've had a lot of not just musical nights there, but plays and educational nights. And so I really want to make sure y'all know that I am going to continue to talk to them, and I'm sure they're going to talk to you because it's important that we check in with people that are trying to keep that geographically wonderful place going for us. And the SDAT will be using it in August because there's no other building to use to get that many people. So when they come together for community stakeholder work, I think we went over there and asked them, and it looks like we're going to be using the theater. On Saturday the 2nd, I did have the opportunity to go to the Jazz Village and the Healdsburg Jazz Festival and open that. And it was really nice to have the microphone. Oh, okay. And it was really fun talking to people, and actually as a mayor being able to talk to people. And it was an interactive place, and I think you all know that they're going to have that up. I really appreciate the city's work on that to assure that we do collaborate with our arts. I think it's the way we're all going to stay alive through all this tension from the local to the national and the world. And so I just want to appreciate that group, and we already did today. I did go yesterday. You already heard. I was doing the little thing because that's the way that guy plays the music. He uses his elbows to greet people. It's wonderful. We should try it. And I talked with Judy Voigt, who I really had never talked to before, and I know you know her. Some of you worked with her. I know she spoke very highly of Ray Holly. I just really appreciate meeting people that contribute to the arts. So I really hope our council can continue to look at that one goal, and we can, move it and maybe even look at helping the Raven and just doing some more work with that. And I just want to also thank Vice Mayor Hagley, because for whatever reason, I don't know, I feel like you're just so respectful to me, and I just want to thank you for that. When you have vice mayor-mayor relationship, like vice, but you're just a real gentleman, and I really appreciate your demeanor, and I just want to commend you in public. And thank the staff too, because I know it's trying some nights, especially when it's what time now, and I'm still talking. But thank you so much for your hard work to get what we need done when we get it done. Tomorrow we're going to be doing Planning Commission interviews at 9 o'clock, so we'll see you here. And I hope everyone is working from the same rules on that. And when are we going to revisit guns?
Second meeting in August is.
Okay, so that's in August. And then what is our next agenda other than the GMO language and maybe some of the details?
The agenda should be attached to the existing agenda. I don't remember off the top of my head, but.
Okay, I didn't know if there was something really
those
big.
Those agenda items are actually on as part of this agenda at the bottom.
11 public hearings?
That is incorrect.
Okay, well, I'll be better now that I know how to do a public
I believe the
hearing.
lighting and landscaping assessment is the next one, but I think that might be a typo.
Okay, and I would like to end my report by saying we've only just begun. I won't sing it though. Okay, all right, so with that in mind, I would like to move out to our next thing, which is written communications, and I hope that you're reading them because there's some wonderful work being done by commissions. The closed session. We already did that, right? Okay. And so we have future agenda items coming up. I already went to that. So at this point, I would like to adjourn the city council meeting at 9:34 p.m. June 4th, 2018.